Chapter 59. The people in the square didn't know what happened in the main hall, but they all saw the result. When they heard Zixia sect head Li's order, sect head Fong was immediately beaten down. No one knew what they did to him, but he couldn't resist at all. The other core formation cultivators were nowhere to be seen. It was unclear whether they fell into a trap or were persuaded. Core formation cultivators cherished their lives very much. Even if their sect was destroyed, they might not necessarily be willing to risk their lives. Sect head Fong was, after all, the sect head of a sect. He also knew that with his status, it wouldn't be good for Yunwu's sect to be destroyed, so he risked his life to resist. Now that sect head Fong was defeated and obviously wouldn't be spared, the Yunwu sect disciples in the square were all frightened and scared. Fong Dingwe, die in peace. Today, our Zixia sect will merge with the other three groups, and from now on, will be the 8th Great Cultivation Group. Ha ha! Amidst the laughter, sect head Fong fell to the ground with a loud bang. A sorrowful and indignant shout came from the Yunwu sect disciples. Sect Headley turned his head. Ruthlessness flashed in his eyes as he waved his sleeve. Instantly, that person screamed and fell to the ground. Emotinga turned her head and saw the foundation building cultivator lying on the ground. His eyes were wide open, as if he died with a grievance. There was a bloody hole in his body, and blood was gurgling out. At this time, she heard a mournful shout, "Father!" It was Wang Qianni. The dead foundation building cultivator was her father, Wang Qiao. Although Wang Qianni had a foundation building cultivator as her father, she never showed off. Usually, she only said she was Wang Qiao's disciple. This was the first time she called him that in front of outsiders. Emotinga looked worriedly at sect head Li, who was still in the air. Fortunately, sect head Li didn't want to kill him since he saw he was just an aura-refining cultivator. Under this ruthlessness, none of the Yunwu sect disciples dared to move. Several foundation-building cultivators were trembling with fear. They didn't expect Li Mingzhang to be so cruel and merciless. Wang Xiao was killed right after he shouted. Sect head Li seemed very satisfied when he saw the silence below. He even smiled. Disciples, as you can see, Yunwu sect is removed from East Kunwu from now on. If you join Zixia sect, you'll receive the same treatment as before, maybe even better. Otherwise, he glanced at the square, and his gaze stopped on Wang Qiao's corpse. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Under such a combination of carrots and carrots, Yunwu sect's aura-refining disciples and several foundation-building disciples didn't dare to move in the slightest. All of them acquiesced to this result. Sect leader Li grunted with satisfaction and turned to the disciples of Jindao School. You don't have to take any chances. Now that Jindao School leader can't move, you're at our mercy. Your Jindao School is the same as Yunwu sect. From today onwards, you'll belong to my Zixia sect. If there's anyone who doesn't accept with Yunwu sect, as an example, no one in Jindao School dared to make a move. Right now, Zixia sect was really too powerful. Even if the two groups joined forces, it still wouldn't be enough to fight against them, let alone now that all the Golden Core cultivators were trapped by them. At this moment, several people flew out from the ruins of the main hall. Some were carrying, some were dead, and some were alive. They were the core formation cultivators from Yunwu sect and Jindao School. Most of them were already dead. A few of them were still alive, but they were still unconscious. She didn't know what method Zixia sect used to catch so many core formation cultivators in one fell swoop. Sect leader Li turned around and said to someone, "Brother Jiang, this time, it's all thanks to you. In the future, Zixia sect's Mount Yunwu branch will depend on you." The person he called Brother Jiang was a man who seemed to be in his 30s. He wore a yellow robe, and on his cuffs there were several clouds embroidered. This was the symbol of Yunwu sect. The man looked very indifferent as he said, "How can I disobey the sect leader's order?" From his words, he already regarded sect leader Li as the head of the three groups. Sect leader Li seemed to be very satisfied with his answer and laughed. Obviously, this cultivator, surnamed Jiang, was Yunwu sect spy. Emotinga didn't know what benefits Zixia sect promised him to make him betray his own sect. Most core formation cultivators were proud and arrogant. If they didn't promise great benefits, they wouldn't bear such infamy. At this moment, there was a commotion in Jindao School's camp. A core formation cultivator carried a person over and threw him in front of sect leader Li. Mo Tinga focused her gaze and saw that it was actually Jindao School's school leader Jin. At this moment, sect leader Li was very complacent. He stared at the ashen-faced school leader Jin and said with a smile, "Brother Jin, considering our many years of friendship, I'll give you another chance. How about Jindao School submit to my Zixia sect?" School leader Jin looked very angry. His whole body was in a sorry state. He turned to look at Jindao School's camp, then his gaze fell on the corpse on the side. After a long time, he finally sighed dejectedly. "Do I have any other choice now? You're the knife, and I'm the meat. I can only let Brotherly make the decision." His words clearly showed that he had accepted his fate. Although everyone knew this, it was different when the sect leader personally said it. The disciples of Jindao School immediately gave up. The overall situation was set. Jindao School no longer existed. Sect leader Li revealed a satisfied smile. He raised his head and gazed into the distance. "That'll do. Marshal Uncle Qian has given his order. Since these people have been subdued, it's time to deal with the remaining problems." Remaining problems? For a moment, Mo Tinga was puzzled. However, she saw sect leader Li give an order, leaving a core formation cultivator here. He then led everyone away, taking school leader Jin with him. It was only when their flight lights disappeared into the horizon that the aura-refining disciples in the square heaved sighs of relief. The spiritual aura pressure from so many core formation cultivators was really hard for them to bear. As soon as they left, the disciples of Zixia sect were already talking and laughing happily. They naturally didn't know about such an important matter beforehand. However, they were naturally happy to see their sect annexing the other two cultivation groups and becoming the biggest cultivation group in this area. In contrast, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao School were all dispirited and anxious. Although sect leader Li wanted them to submit and not kill them, they were the ones who were annexed after all. Who knew what would happen in the future? Besides, most of them were disciples of cultivation clans attached to Yunwu sect. They didn't know whether their clans would suffer a calamity because of this. If they did, their clans would be exterminated. The only remaining core formation cultivator was currently sitting cross-legged in the center of the square. Perhaps because the noise was too loud, he opened his eyes and shouted, "My sect's disciples can leave, but the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao School are not allowed to leave even half a step." Once he said that, the square immediately became quiet. The disciples of Zixia sect lowered their heads and left one after another. The disciples of the other two cultivation groups didn't dare to make any noise. Seeing that all the disciples of Zixia sect had left in just a moment, the core formation cultivator once again closed his eyes and meditated. After a long time, seeing that the core formation cultivator wasn't paying any attention to them, the disciples of the two cultivation groups went to look for their relatives and friends to discuss the matter in low voices. Upon seeing this, Mo Tinga also quietly went to Wang Qin's place. Since Wang Qiao's death, Wang Qinyi had been holding her father's corpse, sitting on the ground in a daze while shedding tears. It seemed like she couldn't accept what had happened. Shen Bing and Murong Yin were already by her side. The two of them tried to persuade her in low voices, but their hearts were also burning with anxiety. The two of them were also disciples of cultivation clans, and they even had masters. Faced with this kind of unforeseen event, they were afraid their clans and masters would be implicated. Mo Tinga first saluted Shen Bing and Murong Yin when she arrived by their side. She then advised Wang Qinyi in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Sister Wang, now isn't the time to be sad. Marshal Uncle Wang has passed away, so the rest of the matters will have to depend on you. You have to keep your spirits up." Wang Qinyi's gaze wavered. Mo Tinga hastily said, "We still have to rely on Senior Marshal Sister Wang to take care of your mother and the people of Wang clan, lest they get involved in this matter." Wang Qinyi took a deep breath wiped her tears, and looked at Mo Tienga. Thank you for the reminder, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. I'll persevere. Mo Tienga nodded lightly, then no longer said anything to them. Although she was familiar with Wang Qianni, their friendship hadn't reached the point where they could advance or retreat together. Before the matter was clear, it was better for them not to have too many interactions. Mo Tienga raised her head, wanting to look for Lu Yidao and the others, but she saw Jiang Shanghong first. Jiang Shanghong's expression was unsightly and looked increasingly gloomy for some unknown reason. Chapter 60. Before long, they found Su Jingji. When Mo Tienga approached him, she discovered that his expression was also very unsightly. She pulled his sleeve to draw his attention back to her. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Su Jingji trembled slightly. How could this be? How could Mo Tienga answer this question? She could only comfort him. Senior Marshal Brother Su, don't worry. I think they just want to annex the other two groups. As long as it's not necessary, they won't kill anyone. Su Jingji shook his head. How could it be that easy to annex other cultivation groups? The 3 cultivation groups have been established here for several thousand years. It's not like there hasn't been a situation where one of them was especially powerful, but they've always lived in harmony. Every cultivation group has a complicated relationship. It's easy to oppress them with force, but it's not easy to completely control them. I have a feeling that if Zixia sect makes a move, blood will flow like a river. Mo Tienga was speechless. She didn't really understand the matters of cultivation groups and clans, so what Su Jingji said sounded very reasonable. He turned around and saw that Qin she had come looking for him. Junior Marshal Brothers. Although his expression was calm, it was much graver than usual. Senior Marshal Brother Qin. Mo Tienga turned to look at him. Have you seen Senior Marshal Brother Lu? Qin she shook his head. I don't know where Senior Marshal Brother Lu is. I only saw you two. He paused for a moment, then said, but I saw Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, and his complexion looked very bad. Su Jingji snorted coldly. Of course his expression wasn't good. It was their Jiang clan who betrayed Yunwu sect. Both Mo Tienga and Qin, she were stunned. Jiang clan? The core formation cultivator who acted as a spy just now was indeed called Brother Jiang. So that's Jiang clan's core formation grandmaster. Qin she nodded slightly. It seems Senior Marshal Brother Jiang also feels bad. What's there to be unhappy about? Su Jingji sneered. This time, their Jiang clan has gotten what they wanted. In order to seize the sect's power, they didn't hesitate to become someone else's grandson. Mo Tienga and Qin she glanced at each other but didn't answer. Everyone knew that Jiang Shanghong and Jiang clan weren't on good terms. Besides, the clan's aura-refining disciples basically didn't know about this kind of matter. Most likely, when Jiang Shanghong found out about it, his mood would be far more complicated than others. Qin she pondered for a moment, then said, aside from waiting, there's no other way. Junior Apprentice Brother Su, raise your spirits. If there are any changes, it'll be easier to deal with them. How could Su Jingji not know? He just felt restless when he thought about his family and Yunwu sect. The 3 of them found a corner and slowly waited. After a night, a streak of light finally flashed across the horizon. This streak of light landed on the square. It was a core formation cultivator. After exchanging a few words with the guards, the man walked towards the Yunwu sect disciples and said, all disciples, follow me back to Yunwu sect. You're not allowed to disobey my order. Mo Tienga and the other 2 looked hesitant when they heard what he said. Su Jingji whispered, could it be? Both of them could guess what he wanted to say. Now that they were called back, it could only mean that the matter had been settled. It was unknown what they had done in order to seize power in the sect. Qin she remained calm and said, we'll know once we go back and take a look. Mo Tienga nodded. Yes. Senior Brother Su, let's go back first. Su Jingji nodded with a pale face. Several hundred Yunwu sect disciples boarded this core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon. When they came, they were restless because they were excited. Now that they were going back, they were still restless because they were frightened. Although Mo Tienga wasn't as worried as Su Jingji, She was also afraid they might hurt innocent people during the fight. If the fight of magical powers between core formation cultivators destroyed Mount Yunwu's market square, second uncle would be in danger. His heart was burning with anxiety, and the journey of a few hours was especially long. After an unknown amount of time, the gate of Mount Yunwu finally appeared below. When they landed on Yunwu Sec Square, the core formation cultivator shouted, "All disciples, return to your immortals' caves. Don't go out at will." Naturally, no one dared to question him. The Yunwu sect disciples lowered their heads and left one after another. Even if they were worried about their family, they didn't dare to say anything. Mo Tinga glanced at the foot of the mountain. Everything seemed calm, and there were no signs of fighting. Second uncle should be safe, right? When they returned to their residence, everyone didn't even have the mood to talk. They just sat in the small living room in a daze. Even Jiang Shanghong didn't return to his room. Like them, he was staring at the gate in a daze. They didn't know where Lu Yidao had gone. Even now, there was no trace of him. The longer Su Jingji waited, the more anxious he became. He stood up and started walking in circles in the living room. Jiang Shanghong finally slammed the teacup in his hand on the table with a loud bang and said in a rough voice, "Stop walking." This sentence gave Su Jingji a breakthrough in his depressed mood. He immediately stood still. His eyes seemed to be spitting fire. After a long time, he finally straightened his neck and said, "What did you say?" Jiang Shanghong said in a muffled voice, "You're making me dizzy." Su Jingji paused for a while, then suddenly took a step forward. He gnashed his teeth and said, "You still dare to talk? It's all your Jiang clan's fault. As elders of Yunwu's sect, you actually colluded with outsiders. You still have the face to talk." Jiang Shanghong's complexion turned pale, but in the next second, he stood up with a flushed face. "What does it have to do with me? What kind of people do you think the others are? It's your Su clan. It's just that you don't have the ability. Otherwise, who knows who would have betrayed you?" Su Jingji's expression changed greatly. He rushed forward, grabbed Jiang Shanghong's collar, and was about to punch him. How could Jiang Shanghong be willing to show weakness? Without saying a word, the two of them started a fight. Mo Tinga's mind was in a mess, but seeing them like this, she had no choice but to stop them. However, she still had misgivings and didn't dare to have too much contact with them. Since she couldn't pull them away, she could only cast a pleading gaze towards Qin Shi, who was still sitting motionlessly. Qin, she shook his head at her. Mo Tinga didn't understand. What does he mean? Don't care? Qin Shi sighed and pointed at the seat next to him. He waited until she hesitantly came over and sat down before he said, "The two of them aren't in a bad mood. It's good for them to vent their feelings by fighting. Don't worry. You see, they aren't using any spiritual aura, so they can't hurt anyone." Really? She turned around and saw that the two of them had finally gotten into a tussle. They were punching and kicking like mortals in the secular world, completely disorderly. After a long time, the two of them were tired and finally stopped. However, both of them were badly battered and gasping for breath. Mo Tinga sighed and helped Su Jingji up. "Senior Martial Brother Su, I won't help you treat your injuries. You should look at yourself in the mirror." Su Jingji sat on a chair and smiled bitterly. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, you're still telling jokes at this time? What can I do if I don't tell jokes?" Mo Tinga stared at the tranquil scene outside the room. "We can't do anything." Right at that moment, someone hurriedly walked into the courtyard. Su Jingji was pleasantly surprised. It's Senior Martial Brother Lu. Everyone crowded around him. Lu Yidao was startled the moment he entered the room. Su Jingji couldn't help but ask, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, what happened? Where did you go?" Lu Yidao looked at them and smiled bitterly. "I was left behind in Zixia sect and just came back." He saw the bruises on Su Jingji's and Jiang Shanghong's faces. "Junior Martial Brothers, what happened?" "Qin," she said, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, you don't need to worry. They're just having an argument. I wonder if Senior Martial Brother saw the situation outside when you came back." Lu Yidao looked at the two of them hesitantly and answered, "Junior Martial Brothers, you don't need to worry. There's no big change in the sect. However, in the next few days, we'd better not go out." I heard they're going to carry out a purge of Yunwu sect's forces. We better not get involved. Is that so? Su Jingji smiled bitterly. I wonder how my family is. If there's nothing going on, they should have sent us a message. Lu Yidao comforted him. Junior Marshal Brother Su, don't worry. Cultivation clans are the foundation of cultivation groups. As long as your family doesn't resist, nothing will happen. Although he said that, Su Jingji still couldn't help but worry. Although Jiang Shanghong wasn't worried about his family, his mood became even worse when he heard this news. Without saying a word, he went back to his room and slammed the door with a loud bang. Mo Tinga stared outside the room with a heavy heart. Sure enough, they're going to carry out a purge. It seemed that under this tranquility, Yunwu sect was really going to be bathed in blood. Chapter 61. Several days later, Yunwu sect officially changed its name to Zixia sect's Mount Yunwu branch. As soon as she regained her freedom, Mo Tinga went down the mountain to see if second uncle was doing well and then told him about this matter. In the past few days, Yi Jiang had already understood everything. He only said to her, just concentrate on cultivating. You don't need to care about this kind of thing. As long as you can build your foundation, it doesn't matter which cultivation group you're in. In all fairness, Mo Tinga didn't have any feelings for cultivation groups. In the past 10 years, it was second uncle who took her to wander around, devoted himself to raising her. Yunwu sect didn't do anything for her, and she didn't have too many feelings for Yunwu sect either. In the entire celestial pole, or in the entire cultivation world, most people were this practical. Now that she was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, she could already abstain from eating, so she simply stayed in her room to stabilize her cultivation level and study formations. She hadn't had time to study the Chimen Duanjia she obtained in Miwu Valley 2 years ago. Now was the perfect time to carefully study it. During the time she stayed in her room, the influence of the annexation of the sect became greater and greater. Zixia sect sent several core formation cultivators to take over. Now, there was no sect head of Yunwu's sect, only the master of Mount Yunwu, and the master of this branch was precisely the core formation cultivator from Jiang clan. Of course, this didn't have much to do with Jiang Shanghong. He wasn't close to his sect and had a grudge against Jiang Changxian. It was already good enough that he wasn't bullied, so how could he enjoy any special treatment? Apart from Jiang clan, none of the other core formation cultivators escaped this calamity. Even their clans were implicated. Moreover, most of the sect's disciples came from cultivation clans. Because of threats and promises, disciples died every day because of this, causing everyone to live in fear every day. Normally, the individual cultivators who entered the sect through the Immortals' assembly shouldn't be affected too much, but several disciples were implicated and died. Fortunately, Su Jingji wasn't among them. Later, Mo Tinga heard that Wang Qinyi married a junior of a core formation cultivator from Zixia sect and went to Zixia sect. Because of this, Wang clan was spared and was no longer investigated. Mo Tinga could only sigh about this. As a woman, her body was her last asset. Senior Marshal Sister Wang was a proud woman. Although her father was a foundation-building cultivator, she was never proud and always treated others kindly. But in the end, she couldn't protect herself. Mo Tinga recalled when she ran into Shun Bing and Mo Tinga in Miwu Valley. Mo Tinga mentioned that she was verbally harassed by Shun Bing. Although Shun Bing was angry, she tolerated it, but Mo Tinga cursed at her. Mo Tinga also recalled that today, she was forced to marry the hedonistic son of a rich family she despised the most. She really had no control over her own fate. After a while, she heard that Shen Bing was forced to become sect head Li's son's concubine. Senior sister Shen Bing had always been famous for her beauty in the 3 sections. Many of the disciples of the 3 sects had fallen under her skirt. She was not surprised at all that she had fallen into such a situation. Beauty was wealth, but it was also a curse. If she hadn't disguised herself as a man and stopped showing her womanly side, she probably wouldn't have had a good ending today. Later, Yanzimo Li's sect Yin sect, Yin Yin, as Mo Xia sect's Lizi cities well as she could. Mo, as she said, moo's moo. Ching, moo is ching moo. Apart from replying with a blessing summoning amulet, there was nothing else she could do. Several months later, the storm of annexing the two sects gradually subsided. When Mo Tinga came out of her room and saw the three of them in the small living room, she couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. What's going on? Lu Yidao beckoned her over. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, come over and let's have a chat. Filled with questions, he walked over and found a chair to sit on. Mo Tinga really didn't believe she was fine. Lu Yidao and Su Jingji were extroverted, so it was normal for them to gather and chat when they had nothing to do. However, she never left his room unless he had something to do. The reason he stayed outside was either because he had something to do or because he was interested in a topic. Lu Yidao excitedly asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you still don't know about the news that just came out, right? What news? Lu Yidao mysteriously paused for a moment before continuing. News about foundation building pills. Mo Tinga almost forgot about this matter. After the sect's extermination, she also forgot about the minor competition that was supposed to be held several months ago. What's wrong? Are they going to hold the minor competition again? Lu Yidao shook his head, feeling extremely excited. I heard that in order to appease the sect's disciples, they're going to increase the distribution of foundation-building pills and change the method of distribution. Method? What method? Are we not going to hold the minor competition anymore? Lu Yidao nodded. Yes, the minor competition this time is canceled. Mo Tinga didn't understand. Then what method are they going to use? Su Jingji, who had been silent the whole time, coldly snorted and said, Isn't it because too many people died this time? If we hold the minor competition, it'll be too cold and cheerless, so they're changing the method. Su Jingji's mood had always been bad. Although their Su clan wasn't implicated, they weren't having a good time either. Su Jingji originally had an uncle in the foundation building realm, but because he was close to Sec Head Fong, he was demoted back to the clan. Fortunately, he expressed his stance quickly, so he didn't implicate other people. Coupled with Shun Bing's and Wang Qin's experiences, Su Jingji, who was also a descendant of a cultivation clan, was filled with hatred. Upon seeing his reaction, she coughed and said, Junior Marshal Brother Su, it's better for you to calm down a bit. No matter what happened in the past, Zixia sect is hanging over our heads now. Su Jingji's expression stiffened, but in the end, he still agreed. How could he not know this? However, his life had been smooth ever since he was a child. Aside from the Immortals' Assembly, he had never encountered such a depressing matter, so he didn't hide his emotions. Lu Yidao felt very embarrassed after being interrupted. Su Jingji's mood wasn't right, yet he was so excited. He immediately restrained his emotions and said, I heard the demonic beasts in the depths of Kunlun Mountain Range are getting restless again, and the small demonic beasts in the vicinity are also frequently injuring people. Therefore, the sect has decided to reward us according to the number of demonic beasts we catch in Mount Yunwu within a day. The first few dozen disciples will be qualified to receive foundation-building pills. Is that so? Mo Tinga frowned. In the depths of the south of Kunwu was a dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Reportedly, there were many high-level demonic beasts there, but in the vicinity of the sect, there were generally only first and second-rank demonic beasts. The first rank was equivalent to the aura refining realm, while the second rank was equivalent to the early stage of the foundation building realm. As long as aura refining disciples were careful, they could deal with first-rank demonic beasts. As for second-rank demonic beasts, although it was a bit difficult, demonic beasts didn't know how to use talismans and didn't know many spells, so they could still be killed if many people ganged up on them. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could still run away. However, although this method sounded good, it wasn't like the minor competition where even if they were strong enough, one of them would meet a tragic end if they met a similar opponent. But after careful consideration, it was actually a preferential treatment for cultivation clans because they had a lot of manpower. When the time came, they could concentrate on one person and obtain a foundation-building pill. As for the other disciples, who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others. After all, if there were spoils of war, there would be rewards. Can we go together? Liu Yidao shook his head. This time, we won't be competing in Miwu Valley. Disciples will be competing with each other. Of course, if we run into each other inside, we'll presumably be allowed to move together. However, the chances of that happening are really low. The mountain forest is too big. Imo Tinga was calculating in her heart. This method had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that she didn't need to be afraid of being seen by others, so she could just use whatever method she had. The disadvantage was that she had to be extra careful. After all, if she wasn't careful when fighting demonic beasts, she might end up dying in their mouths. Chapter 62. The vast forest stretched as far as the eye could see. It was verdant and lush, stretching for thousands of miles. Imo Tinga stood on top of a high cliff, silently watching. This was the southern end of Kunwa mountain range, a part of the forest. Countless demonic beasts lived here. Some were tamed by cultivators and became spiritual beasts, but most of them lived freely in this forest, cultivating and taking human forms. It was said that in the innermost part of the forest, near the sea, lived many demonic beasts that had already taken human forms. They generally didn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, they couldn't help but want to order low-level demonic beasts to attack and occupy the areas where human cultivators lived. Of course, they couldn't occupy those areas under normal circumstances. However, they could obtain a lot of medicinal pills to help their cultivation every time they came here, so they were very happy. Every time this happened, it was a gamble. Sometimes the human cultivators suffered heavy losses, but sometimes they obtained a lot of good demonic beast corpses to be used as tool refining materials. Imo Tinga had never encountered this kind of situation. She was only a low-level cultivator and had only been in Kunwu for 10 years. The last time she fought against demonic beasts was at least 50 or 60 years ago. Standing on this high cliff with her were a core formation cultivator, more than 10 foundation building cultivators, and several hundred aura refining cultivators. The consequences of Zixia sect annexing Yunwu sect could already be seen. In the last minor competition, Yunwu sect had more than 400 disciples in the 7th layer or above, but now there were probably less than 300, maybe even fewer. Among these cultivators, Imo Tinga didn't see many familiar figures. Senior Marshal Brother Zhou didn't come because, with his cultivation level in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, he would definitely get a share of the foundation building pills. Since the sect had just suffered a disaster, he didn't want to attract attention, so he simply didn't participate. Wang Qianyi and Shun Bing also didn't come. The two of them went to Zixia sect's main branch, and it was said that they had already decided to get a share of the foundation building pills. Because of this, Imo Tinga felt a little better. At least the two of them weren't making unnecessary sacrifices. Morong Yin, on the other hand, came. She looked pale and skinny, standing alone in the crowd. Her face was expressionless, and her original beauty was completely gone. Seeing her appearance, Imo Tinga sighed in her heart. This was also good. At least, she wouldn't follow in Wang Qianyi and Shun Bing's footsteps. Not long after, another group of people flew over from the horizon and landed on this flat cliff. They were Jindao School's disciples. Just like Yunwu sect, although they didn't change the color of their clothes, they added the symbol of Zixia sect. At a rough glance, there were only about 100 Jindao School disciples. Apparently, they had also gone through a purge. Everyone had a distracted expression on their faces. Fighting over foundation building pills was something like that, yet none of them looked excited. Obviously, what they saw was even more miserable than what Yunwu sect's disciples experienced. The core formation cultivator leading them was a Taoist priest dressed in secular clothes. Because of this, Imo Tinga stared at him a few more times. Although the righteous cultivators in the immortal cultivation world all practiced Tao techniques, many of them dressed as Taoists, which was different from the secular world. Most of the Taoists in the secular world wore cyan or dark blue buttoned robes, which were thick and heavy without any sense of hierarchy. Taoist robes in the cultivation world, on the other hand, were mostly beautified. Dark blue robes, buttoned robes, and plain robe were layered with innate trigrams and taiji cloud patterns. Their colors were also distinguished, making them look elegant yet dignified. Compared to the Taoists in the secular world, Taoists appeared even more elegant and graceful. Therefore, they rarely wore secular Taoist robes because they couldn't show the temperament of cultivators. The Taoist in front of her was obviously a core formation cultivator, but he didn't care about what he wore at all. It was obvious that he had a firm Tao heart. Once this person arrived, the current branch master of Yunwu Mountain greeted him enthusiastically. Senior Marshal Brother Lin, long time no see. This Taoist didn't give him any face. He only let out a soft humph, then closed his eyes to rest. Branch Master Jiang was snubbed, so he looked a little embarrassed. Mo Tinga saw that some of the Yunwu sect disciples, such as Su Jingji, were secretly pleased. Jiang Shanghong, on the other hand, looked annoyed. It seemed he couldn't bear to see his elder's behavior. He stared at a cultivator next to Branch Master Jiang, hatred flashing across his face. Mo Tinga realized that person was Jiang Chengxian, a disciple of Jiang clan who once bullied her. This Jiang Chengxian seemed to be Branch Master Jiang's direct descendant. He always followed Branch Master Jiang, and there was a complacent expression on his face. Although Mo Tinga wasn't close to Jiang Shanghong, upon seeing this scene, she still somewhat despised Jiang Chengxian. He was a hedonistic son of a rich family who relied on his blood relationship with his elder to commit outrages. He didn't concentrate on cultivating and didn't have any real skills. It was no wonder Jiang Shanghong didn't like him. After a while, another group of people flew over from the horizon. The number of people was much more than the number of their two groups. They were Zixia sect disciples. The cultivator who led Zixia sect group was rather good-natured. He was also indifferent to Branch Master Jiang, but he was very polite to that Taoist. After the three of them talked for a while, they each used their magic weapons. In an instant, a transporting formation appeared out of thin air. It seemed to be the same technique as the one in Miwu Valley. Presumably, it had been used to test the disciples before. All disciples go in one by one. No pushing. After experiencing the calamity that befell their sect, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school were naturally quiet. On the other hand, Zixia sect's disciples were beaming with joy and rushed to go in first. The disciples of the other two groups also didn't care and just waited. Mo Tinga looked left and right. Among her fellow martial brothers, Lu Yidao was itching to try. Su Jingji had a calm expression. Qin Shi still had a calm expression, and Jiang Shanghong had a deep frown on his face. She touched her face and felt that it was a bit stiff, so she slowed down her breathing and adjusted her mentality. She was determined to obtain the foundation-building pill. In the future, if she couldn't stand Zixia sect's way of doing things, she could find an excuse to leave the mountain and never come back. Zixia sect didn't have time to care about a low-level disciple. Before that, it would be best if she could obtain the foundation-building pill in the sect and build her foundation. Otherwise, with only her aura-refining cultivation level and second uncle's lifespan approaching its end, she wouldn't dare to casually leave. As her imagination ran wild, she suddenly noticed that Su Jingji, who was the closest to her, seemed to be trembling. Mo Tinga called out in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother Su?" Su Jingji turned his head. His face was so pale that he was sweating profusely. His voice was also trembling slightly. Mo Tinga sighed. "We haven't gone in yet. Don't collapse." Upon hearing what she said, Su Jingji hastily wiped his sweat and pretended that nothing had happened. "Junior Marshal Brother, you doesn't need to worry. Even if I worry, I won't be able to," Mo Tinga said. "You have to be alert. This forest is very dangerous, and we can't travel together." Su Jingji nodded. After a long time, he seemed to still be in a bad mood. He whispered to her, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'm really worried. Our three groups obviously have a grudge against each other. If we go into the forest like this, won't there be some kind of conflict?" Mo Tinga was puzzled. Why? Su Jingji was silent for a long time. All of a sudden, he said through clenched teeth, "If I run into that Jiang Chengxian, if I can clean him up, I'll—" A fierce look flashed across his face. She knew what he meant. Mo Tiange was startled. She turned her head around and saw that no one was paying attention to them. She then said in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother Su, you mustn't talk nonsense. You're too nervous." Su Jingji closed his eyes and nodded. He then wiped the sweat on his face and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi is right." Right after he said that, he closed his eyes to rest, adjusting his breath and calming his mind. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then took out something from inside her robe and handed it to him. "Senior Marshal Brother Su, this is a heart-calming talisman. If you can't control yourself, just stick it on your body." Su Jingji opened his eyes. Without saying anything, he accepted the talisman and said, "Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Yi." Mo Tiange smiled. She no longer said anything and just stared at the transporting formation. In just a short while, almost all the Zixia sect disciples had left. She composed herself, then walked towards the transporting formation. Chapter 63. The transporting formation shone brightly. Without any hesitation, Mo Tiange slapped a defensive talisman on her body. This time, it was different from Miwu Valley. No matter what, Miwu Valley had been dealt with by the seniors of the 3 sections. Although there were still demonic beasts, there were only a few left. Moreover, there were some restrictions set up in the valley. As long as the disciples had the medallions, they wouldn't die. But in this forest, it was hard to say. If they really teleported to the front of the demonic beasts and got bitten, it would be fatal. Moreover, there was a turbulent undercurrent between the disciples of the 3 sections. In addition, there were some people who would forget what was right for the sake of profit. They might really lose their lives. Because she'd long anticipated that this trip would definitely be dangerous, she deliberately used some things to exchange with Qin Shi for some talismans. A while ago, Qin Shi had been practicing drawing talismans. Although he lost a lot of his talismans, he also made quite a few finished ones. Since he didn't like them, he said he had a lot left, so the other 3 people exchanged a lot of talismans with him. Mo Tiange didn't have many spirit stones left, so she used some materials to exchange with him. He didn't really care because he dabbled in both pill concocting and tool refining, so he accepted everything she offered. Mo Tiange was somewhat worried about preparing for the trial this time. She wasn't a wealthy cultivator, and all the spirit stones she needed for cultivation were obtained through rewards or transactions. Unfortunately, she didn't have a good aptitude, so the amount of spirit stones she needed to cultivate was quite a lot. It turned out that second uncle had sold his own belongings to prepare talismans and pills for her during the minor competition of the 3 sects. She really didn't have any other belongings. There were only about 100 or so spirit stones left, which were reserved for laying formations. There were also some spiritual plants, spiritual objects, and other materials, but most of them had already been exchanged for spirit stones, so the remaining ones couldn't be sold for much money. There were also too few talismans, so they couldn't be exchanged for spirit stones. In addition, there were a bunch of unknown things. Some of them were recognized by Qin Shi, so he exchanged them for talismans. As for the rest, he didn't know what they were. She remembered that she had obtained a bead from the man of the clan. It was about the size of a child's fist. She could feel the surging spiritual qi in it, but no one could recognize what it was. In this way, only the spiritual weapons were still valuable. Most of them were obtained from the man from the clan 3 years ago, so she didn't dare to sell them. However, this wasn't something she needed to worry about right now. At the very least, she had made sufficient preparations for this test. Once she was transported into the forest, Mo Tiange immediately looked around. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any demonic beasts. She heaved a sigh of relief and took a step forward. The next moment, she missed her footing and fell straight down. She hurriedly used the light body technique, found a foothold, and leaped up. This was a steep slope. Because there were too many vines, it looked like solid ground in front, but it was actually just vines attached to it. She slapped her forehead. It was really a false alarm. She had observed the surroundings, but had forgotten to look under her feet. It seemed that she would have to pay more attention in the future. He was surrounded by dense trees and vines that crawled everywhere. Beneath his feet was a thick layer of dried leaves. It was very difficult to find a path. From inside her robe, Emotinga took out a jade slip engraved with a map of this place. However, this map was too rough, and there was no reference nearby, so she simply couldn't find it. She could only give up. She carefully restrained her breath, took out her greenwood sword, and walked through the forest. There was an advantage to being here, and that was that she cultivated a wood-attributed cultivation technique. In this forest, the wood chi was dense, and the power of her cultivation technique would be even greater. Suddenly, she felt a spiritual aura movement behind her. Imo Tinga, who had been observing her surroundings attentively, immediately moved. She blocked with her greenwood sword and turned around to see her opponent. It was actually a brightly colored, flat-headed demonic snake. In an instant, her hair stood on end. Even though she considered herself bold, she really wanted to vomit when facing such a snake. But now wasn't the time to vomit. This demonic snake's breath wasn't weak. If she didn't concentrate and died under its mouth, it would be even more disgusting. This snake was more than 10 feet long, as thick as the mouth of a bull, with a flat head and a thin tongue. Its cold and gloomy eyes were directly staring at her. Judging from the breath it emitted, it was a first-rank demonic beast. In an instant, the snake jumped up and spat black venom towards her. At this time, the defensive talisman on her body took effect. The venom fell off before it could touch her body. After this attack, the defensive barrier on her body shook and was about to break. Emotinga didn't dare to be careless, so she took out another defensive talisman and slapped it on her body. Then she took out her greenwood sword and attacked the snake's weak point. This demonic snake was very agile. It moved as fast as lightning. As it stretched and shrank, it tangled with greenwood sword. Emotinga carefully controlled greenwood sword while taking out a handful of seeds from her chinkoan bag. Taking advantage of the fact that the snake was tangled with greenwood sword, she threw them out. The seeds fell on the snake's body. One by one, they grew into fire thorns, firmly entangling the demonic snake. She calmed down a little, but in the next second, she was so surprised that she almost shouted. The demonic snake stretched and shrank its body. The fire thorns entangling its body couldn't pierce its skin at all. Instead, it swung its tail and sent the thorns flying. Emotinga's expression turned grave. The scales on this snake's skin were unexpectedly so hard that the thorns of the fire thorns couldn't pierce through. The demonic snake dodged greenwood sword and suddenly turned its head towards her. The tip of its tongue spat out wasn't venom, but fog. Emotinga felt dizzy. She was shocked. This must be poisonous fog. She didn't dare to be careless. While holding her breath, she took out a medicinal pill from her chinkoan bag and threw it into her mouth. As the medicinal power of the refreshing pill spread, her mind immediately became clear. She didn't dare to continue entangling with the snake, so she took out a talisman and threw it at the snake's body. A pillar of water soared into the sky and poured on the snake's body. Soon after, it froze into ice, and the demonic snake's body immediately slowed down. Greenwood sword stabbed down. With a pu sound, the sword finally pierced through its scales and firmly nailed it 7 inches from its head. The demonic snake twisted a few times, but it couldn't break free from the ice or the greenwood sword. In the end, it stopped breathing and stopped moving. Emotinga heaved a sigh of relief. She retrieved her greenwood sword and carefully wiped it clean. She regretfully looked at the ice on the demonic snake's body. This freezing talisman wasn't cheap. This forest was really dangerous everywhere. It was only a snake, but it actually put her in such a dangerous situation and even made her use a freezing talisman. Facing the snake's corpse on the ground, Emotinga was in a dilemma. During this trial, the elders of the school clearly told her to bring back the demonic beast's corpse. However, the snake looked really disgusting, so she couldn't do anything about it. After hesitating for a while, she took out a leather pouch from her chinkoan bag. With a flick of her greenwood sword, she picked up the snake's corpse, fastened the mouth of the pouch, and threw it into her chinkoin bag. Once she finished doing all this, she once again restrained her breath, carefully identified her direction, and went out of this forest. In the dense forest, a clear brook flowed through an open space in the forest, meandering downwards. Under the nourishment of this brook, the grassland on both sides was lush and the wildflowers were brilliant. It was indeed a beautiful scene in the wilderness. However, in this beautiful scene, there were two people who ruined it. One of them was wearing purple robes, and the other was wearing yellow robes. Their cuffs were embroidered with the same symbol. The two of them fiercely glared at each other. The purple-robed youth snorted and said angrily, "Jin Dao School's disciple, you actually dared to mount a sneak attack on me?" The yellow-robed, middle-aged cultivator's expression didn't change. He said faintly, "Yellow-haired brat, so what if I mount a sneak attack on you?" Angered by his unmoved attitude, the youth's face twisted. I'm a disciple of Zixia sect's main branch. Aren't you afraid of being punished by your school?" The middle-aged cultivator smiled faintly. "If I did everything cleanly, who would be able to trace it back to me? You." The youth was seething with anger. Presumably, he didn't have enough experience and hadn't experienced any setbacks in his cultivation, so he was easily provoked. He immediately manipulated the spirit tool in his hand and rushed towards the middle-aged cultivator. The middle-aged cultivator cautiously took a step back. While manipulating the spirit tool, he secretly took out a talisman. Both of them were in the 10th layer. For a moment, they were evenly matched as they fought back and forth. Right at this moment, another person came out of the forest. This time, he was wearing black robes. When he saw the two people fighting, his expression changed. After a long time, he finally took out an object from his chinkoin bag and threw it towards one of them. Following the sound of the brook, several spiritual aura fluctuations attracted her attention. She carefully hid her tracks and walked towards the place where the fight was taking place. On the meadow beside the brook, two disciples from Zixia sect and Jindao school were fighting. In the corner of the forest, a Yunwu sect disciple with a ferocious expression threw the spirit tool in his hand. With a blood-curdling scream, that Zixia sect disciple lay in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect both heaved sighs of relief. The two of them didn't fight or talk. They just divided the Zixia sect disciple's belongings, burned his corpse with a fire, and then went their separate ways. Mo Tiange hid herself in the forest, drenched in cold sweat. What Su Jingji was worried about finally happened. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect, who harbored hatred in their hearts, killed the lone Zixia sect disciple to vent their hatred. She could imagine what would happen next. Those who killed Zixia sect disciples couldn't help but attack again. If they attacked too many times, Zixia sect disciples would discover that their fellow disciples were killed. In their anger, they would retaliate against the two groups. The disciples of the three groups would then fight each other, resulting in countless casualties. This trial was indeed full of dangers. Not only did she have to guard against the demonic beasts in the forest, but she also had to worry about other cultivators. After spending a long time to calm down, Mo Tiange once again set foot on the road. Even if she was worried, it was useless. She could only carefully avoid them, because the formation at the exit would only open after one day, and she was determined to obtain the foundation-building pill. Chapter 64. Once she found the stream, Mo Tiange could finally distinguish her position on the map. Then, in order to deliberately avoid others, she carefully studied a route. Fortunately, the information stated roughly what was in each place, and each disciple had a copy of the map. By finding a place that no one liked, she could naturally avoid most people. If someone was unlucky enough to be teleported to that place, he or she would probably leave. The place she found was dangerous in the eyes of ordinary people. There were cliffs, abysses, and a poisonous spring that emitted poisonous fog all year round. The map indicated that this place wasn't good. It wasn't easy to walk, and there weren't any demonic beasts that were easy to kill. However, there were some demonic monkeys that lived in groups, which were quite troublesome. Mo Tinga thought about it. It wasn't easy to walk, so she just had to be careful. After all, she wasn't an ordinary person, so she wouldn't encounter any accidents. As for those demonic monkeys that lived in groups, they were suitable for her. She was good at formations, and first-ranked demonic beasts couldn't recognize them. She just needed to find a suitable place to lay a disorienting formation and lure the monkeys inside. Then, she wouldn't be afraid no matter how many monkeys there were. After making up her mind, she walked smoothly. Although her breath-concealing technique wasn't brilliant, the divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so very few people could detect her. Soon, she arrived at the place indicated on the map. Tinga took a look and unconsciously frowned. This place was indeed, as the information said. It was a disgusting place. Probably because of the poisonous spring, there was poisonous fog as soon as she approached. The shrubs were so dense that there wasn't even a path, and most of them were poisonous. It was obviously daytime, but this place was gray and overcast. She couldn't see the sky at all. Without a better choice, Tinga could only brace herself and go. After sweeping this area with her divine sense, she had a general understanding of the terrain and also found the position of the demonic monkeys. There were many faint spiritual aura fluctuations on the edge of the poisonous spring. The divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so it was difficult to sense the spiritual aura fluctuations of a single low-rank demonic beast. However, when they gathered together, it was very easy to distinguish them. She swallowed a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from affecting her. Then, she laid a simple disorienting formation and a spirit-trapping formation in a place that wasn't too far from her. As its name suggested, the spirit-trapping formation's main function was to make people lose their way. Once they entered the formation, they would keep walking in circles and couldn't get out. The spirit-trapping formation's purpose was to deal with people or beasts with spiritual aura. Once they entered the formation, their spiritual aura would run slower. Generally, this formation would be placed in cultivators' caves to prevent others from breaking in. These two formations were not enough. After thinking for a while, she set up another 5 elements life and death formation. This formation was more troublesome than the previous two, but she had been studying the formation book some time ago and had modified this formation. It could be used for both offense and defense, so it was safer to use it. After MOG's spiritual aura state, she adjusted it, a she to defend, an attack, to be, she, and to MO, she too, to she too, she, MO, into her, she too, in, to her, to the spirit, with, MO, spirit to MO demon. First-ranked demonic beasts weren't much smarter than ordinary beasts. They didn't know how to think and acted according to their instincts. Soon, their figures appeared in the poisonous fog. Sensing the sudden provocative aura, these demonic monkeys pounced towards Tinga's location without the slightest hesitation. However, before they could even get close to her, they began to run in circles. The group of monkeys formed a circle and chased each other, running in circles from head to tail. It looked interesting, but Tinga didn't dare to be careless. She waved the formation flag in her hand. The formation was instantly filled with quicksand and fire. The group of monkeys squeaked. They ran left and right, but they couldn't escape no matter how hard they tried. They were burned by the fire, so they ran and trampled on each other. Tinga waved the formation flag again. Many stones fell from the formation. The group of monkeys had nowhere to hide and died under the stones. Tinga breathed a sigh of relief when all the demonic monkeys were killed. Aura-refining cultivators wouldn't be able to deal with so many first-ranked demonic beasts if they hadn't set traps in advance. Although they were successfully killed, she still spent a lot of spiritual aura. The ability of aura-refining cultivators was too low. They couldn't use multiple spirit tools at the same time, nor could they maintain a fight of magical power for a long time. Even magic weapons, without cultivation level restrictions, couldn't display much of their power. The more she cultivated, the more eager she was to build her foundation. After recovering her spiritual aura, Tinga stood up and cleaned up the mess. There were about 20 to 30 monkeys in the group just now. Presumably, there would be a chaotic fight in this mountain forest, so the number of demonic beasts they killed wouldn't be many. These demonic beasts were enough to exchange for a foundation-building pill. Therefore, after stuffing the corpses of the demonic monkeys into her chinquin bag, she sat in the formation and meditated. She didn't plan to kill any more demonic beasts. Her goal was only to obtain a foundation-building pill. She didn't want to lose her life, nor did she want to be in the limelight. While she was meditating leisurely, a monstrous wave was set off in this mountain forest. The first Xixia sect disciple who was killed wasn't discovered, but it wasn't just one or two people who had this idea. Soon, other people also made their moves. Xixia sect disciples were numerous and powerful. They also felt that these two groups were exterminated, so how could they be willing to give up? By the afternoon, the fight had already been brought to the surface. Although the total number of Yunwu sect and Jindao school's disciples wasn't as many as Xixia sect's disciples, they harbored hatred in their hearts. Moreover, they usually launched sneak attacks and succeeded quite a few times. However, when Xixia sect disciples finally reacted, both sides began to have victories and defeats. As more and more people were killed, they basically didn't care about anything else and started fighting as soon as they saw each other. Tinga didn't know any of this. Fortunately, she came to this place. Otherwise, she would have probably also been involved in the fight. The sky gradually darkened, but Tinga didn't do anything. She just sat in the middle of the formation. She couldn't light the lamp or it would attract other people. Even if she didn't attract other people, it wouldn't be good to fight at night if some demonic beast came. In any case, she could still see a little. She only needed to endure this night because the exit formation would be open tomorrow. Suddenly, she wrinkled her brows and raised her head. Spiritual aura fluctuations were coming from outside. Someone seemed to be coming here. After pondering for a moment, she slightly tidied up the formation she laid, leaving behind the 5 elements life and death formation. She then hid herself and carefully paid attention to that person. That person stumbled as he ran. His steps were weak and he fell from time to time, but he still managed to run all the way to this place. But all of a sudden, he seemed to bump into something. With a bang, there was no sound. Even after a long time, she still couldn't hear any sound. Tinga pondered for a moment, then came out of her hiding place and cautiously felt her way over. She had always been cautious. Now that she had a defensive spell on her body and greenwood sword in her hand, she could deal with this person even if he suddenly launched an attack. Therefore, she decided to go and take a look. Not far from her, there was a person lying motionless on the ground. The sky was too dark, so she couldn't see him clearly. She could only vaguely see that he was wearing black clothes. Tinga felt a bit relieved. She went over to take a look. Sure enough, it was a young Yunwu sect disciple. Senior Martial Brother, Senior Martial Brother. She gently pushed the person. After a long time, the person finally reacted. He raised his head with difficulty and said in a low voice, "Junior Martial's sister, help me." Tinga was dumbfounded. Junior Martial's sister? Before she could think of anything, the person's head tilted to one side and he fainted again. After thinking for a moment, she still helped the person into the formation she laid. She didn't know this person. Yunwu sect had so many aura-refining disciples, but she only knew a few of them. Even the people in the other rooms in the courtyard only looked familiar to her, so she didn't remember this person at all. However, since they were both Yunwu sect disciples and there wasn't any trouble, she could lend him a hand. She then inserted her spiritual aura into the person's body to examine his injuries. After circulating her spiritual aura through the person's meridians, Tinga felt a bit relieved. The injuries on his body were very serious, but his meridians weren't damaged, so it was actually easy. After thinking for a moment, she took out medicinal pills from inside her robe and fed him a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from entering his body. She then fed him an aura-nourishing pill. A refreshing pill was only an ordinary antidote pill. It wasn't a precious medicine. As for healing medicinal pills, she did have small reversion pills on her, but they were expensive. Even foundation-building cultivators could use them. Giving them to an aura-refining cultivator she didn't know would be a bit wasteful. Besides, she didn't know this person at all, so giving him something precious was a bit too kind. Kindness had to be done appropriately to make people feel grateful and not greedy. This was the principal's second uncle taught her. Not long after, the man groaned and seemed to have woken up. Mo Tinga said, "Senior Marshal brother, are you feeling better?" The person opened his eyes, struggled to sit up, and forced a smile. "Junior Marshal brother, thank you. If I didn't run into you, I would have lost my life today." Mo Tinga said faintly, "Senior Marshal brother, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing." The person nodded and took out a jade bottle from inside his robe. After swallowing several medicinal pills, he handed the jade bottle to Mo Tinga. "I don't dare to let Junior Marshal brother suffer any losses." Mo Tinga didn't stand on ceremony and took the bottle. This was also a rule in the cultivation world. First, no one was willing to help others and lose their belongings. Second, people who received favors from others didn't want to owe them favors. Upon seeing her taking the bottle, the person asked, "Junior Marshal brother, where is this place? Is it safe?" Mo Tinga said, "This is the poisonous spring in the northwest." The person must have known about this place, so he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "That's good. Presumably, no one will come here." After a pause, he greeted her again. "I'm Murong Z. May I ask how I should address Junior Marshal brother?" Since he said, "I am," instead of "I'm," he was obviously a well-known figure among aura-refining disciples. Mo Tinga had indeed heard of this name before. Murong Z was the disciple who persisted until the end with Senior Marshal Brother Zhou and the others in Miwu Valley's trial 2 years ago. At the same time, he was also Murong Yan's clan brother. Together with her, he became a disciple of the foundation-building cultivator Lin Qingwan. He was the Senior Marshal Brother Murong Yin mentioned who guarded the medicinal garden and provided seeds. This Senior Marshal brother was indeed quite famous among the aura-refining disciples. Because she and Murong Yin could be considered friends, and Mo Tinga was a bit polite. "So it's Senior Marshal Brother Murong. My name is Yi Xiaotian. I'm an old acquaintance of Senior Marshal Sister Murong." Murong Z let out a soft "ah," then said, "So, it's you? I heard Xiaoyan mention you before." He looked her up and down, then revealed a smile. "No wonder I thought you were a Junior Marshal sister in a daze just now." Mo Tinga originally had doubts, so she naturally asked, "Why is that?" Murong Z pursed his lips and said with a smile, "Because Xiaoyan said it's a pity you're a man. Your figure and appearance are more suitable to be a woman." Mo Tinga was instantly speechless. Aside from Su Jingji, Murong Yin also liked to tease her. She said she was thin and small and had a girlish appearance, so it would be good if she was a woman, and so on. When she thought of Murong Yin, she couldn't help but sigh. The Murong Yin who loved to laugh and play around had already disappeared. Murong Z noticed something was wrong with her expression and thought she didn't like people saying she had a girlish appearance, so he changed the topic. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, did you meet anyone from Zixia sect here?" Mo Tinga shook her head. "No." Judging from Murong Z's expression, something seemed to have happened, so she asked, "Did Senior Marshal Brother Murong encounter something?" This question made Murong Z sigh. He then said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you've always been here, so you probably don't know the disciples of the 3 groups have already started fighting." In fact, Mo Tinga had long foreseen this, but she didn't say it out loud and just pretended she didn't know. "Really? What's going on? I don't know how it started. At first, it was just a private fight, but later on, it turned into a chaotic fight. We joined forces with Jindao School, and were already fighting against Zixia sect. Originally, I didn't want to get involved, but as long as I ran into people from Zixia sect, they would take the initiative to attack me. I had no choice but to protect myself. Just now, I was killing a demonic wolf, but I was sneak attacked by someone. It wasn't easy for me to escape." Speaking up to this point, he had a worried expression on his face. It's so chaotic now. I don't know how Xiaoyan is doing. She used to always be lazy, so fights of magical power are really. Upon hearing what he said, Imo Tinga also felt a bit worried. Although Lu Yidao and Qin, she were experienced in fights of magical power, two fists were no match for four hands. Su Jingji's cultivation level was also ordinary. Although he was a descendant of a cultivation clan and definitely had several treasures, it was hard to say if he encountered a strong enemy. Murong Yin was the most worrisome. She never liked cultivating, and the reason her cultivation level was so high was all because she ate medicinal pills. Her own abilities were really mediocre. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a while. Murong Zi forced himself to smile. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'll take advantage of you. Let me stay here too. My injuries really can't be healed in a short time. Mo Tinga nodded. This place isn't mine. Anyone can come here. Senior Marshal Brother Murong doesn't need to be polite. Murong Zi smiled, then began to meditate to heal his injuries. This place was very dangerous, so it was better for him to recover his spiritual aura as soon as possible. Chapter 65. Inside the poisonous fog, Imo Tinga and Murong Zi were meditating quietly. Their surroundings were quiet. This was a rare moment of peace in this mountain forest. Aside from this, battles were also going on in different places. Although this mountain forest was vast, there were always people who ran into each other. If one of the parties was Zixia sect, it would lead to a chaotic battle. Some people killed, and some people were killed. At night, for safety's sake and to vent their anger, the disciples from both sides gathered together to search for opponents who were alone and kill them to prevent themselves from being killed. Murong Zi seized the time to heal his injuries and restore his spiritual aura, while Imo Tinga was secretly on guard. Unlike her fellow disciples who came from cultivation clans and harbored hatred towards Zixia sect, she didn't want to get involved in any disputes. She just wanted to quietly wait for the exit formation to open and exchange it for a foundation-building pill. Suddenly, she sensed a spiritual aura fluctuation in the air. Imo Tinga opened her eyes. Just as she was about to look at the poisonous spring behind her, she suddenly felt a gust of wind. She promptly pushed Murong Zi away and rolled to the side. Her cautiousness saved 2 lives. In the next moment, the two of them widened their eyes and stared at the thing in front of them in astonishment. This demonic beast had a flat head, sharp teeth, and a bulging back like a small mountain. Its lower body was still in the poisonous spring, but the part that was exposed was enough for them to recognize what kind of demonic beast it was. Murong Zi muttered, "Second-rank demonic beast, iron-teethed crocodile. Turns out there really is a second-rank demonic beast here." Imo Tinga pulled him back and waved her hand, summoning formation flags. The place they were originally meditating was the 5 elements life and death formation she laid. As soon as the iron-teethed crocodile attacked, it entered the formation. "Senior Marshal Brother Murong, what's this?" Murong Zi regained his composure and said with a frown, "This is a second-rank demonic beast, equivalent to an early-stage foundation-building cultivator. We're no match for it." Before they could say anything else, the iron-teethed crocodile dashed forward and opened its mouth to bite them. The two of them hastily retreated. Imo Tinga waved the formation flags, and the formation discs and flags she hid underground instantly stood up. The 5 elements life and death formation began to operate. The things around its body stood up with a paw sound. The iron-teethed crocodile seemed to be stunned for a moment. It blinked its small eyes, but its ability to think was not enough to understand what was happening in front of it. After pausing for a moment, it still rushed over, wanting to swallow the 2 little mosquitoes in front of it. But it failed. Vines instantly appeared beneath its feet and wrapped around its entire body, rendering it unable to move an inch. It angrily swung its tail, and the vines immediately broke. Cold sweat broke out on Imo Tinga's forehead. "This demonic beast's brute force is too strong. My formation won't be able to hold it for long." Murong Zi's complexion also turned pale. "This bit of time isn't enough for us to run." Tinga once again waved the formation flag. Water and quicksand instantly appeared inside the formation, rapidly turning it into a swamp, once again trapping the iron-teethed crocodile. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Senior brother Morong, I'll hold it back. You attack it. If we can't outrun it, we can only fight." Morongzi hesitated for a moment before answering, "If we don't fight now, it'll be too late." Tinga shouted, "Hurry up. I'll think of a way to hold it back so it won't attack you. You attack it as hard as you can." Infected by her attitude, Morongzi clenched his teeth and said, "All right. If worst comes to worst, we'll just fight it." Two aura refining cultivators definitely couldn't defeat a foundation-building cultivator, but a second-ranked demonic beast without the ability to think or use magic weapons might be able to put up a fight. Morongzi immediately summoned his flying sword, used the light body technique, and attacked. But in the next second, his complexion turned unsightly. His flying sword was a gift from an elder in his school. It was even infused with rare iron essence, so it was incomparably sharp. Usually, it had a lot of advantages in fights of magical power, but against this iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin, it unexpectedly didn't have the slightest effect. After the swamp couldn't hold the iron-teethed crocodile any longer, Tinga once again waved her sword, causing a raging fire to appear inside the formation. At the same time, she took out a handful of bewitching flower seeds and threw them at the crocodile. Although the fire stopped the crocodile, the bewitching flower only made it wave its tail. With her current spiritual aura, the seeds she could use could only grow in a short period of time. However, second-ranked demonic beasts already didn't care about these kinds of seeds. With no other choice, she took out a handful of restorative panaceas. Using a formation to trap a second-ranked demonic beast consumed too much spiritual aura, so she had no choice but to consume panaceas to drag it down. On the other side, Morongzi wasn't someone with an undeserved reputation. Once he saw that his flying sword was useless, he immediately swapped it for something else, a whip that glittered with a golden light. As soon as he swung the whip, it turned into a streak of golden light, emitting a loud pah. But after he swung it, Morongzi's complexion changed again. This whip still couldn't break the iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin. After this happened a few times, Morongzi's complexion turned ashen. Not only was he unable to break the iron-teethed crocodile's defense, but his spirit tool was also damaged by its bite. As expected of an iron-teethed crocodile, its teeth were extremely sharp. Tinga wasn't much better off. Although she was relying on the formation, her spiritual aura was being drained too quickly by manipulating this formation to resist the second-ranked demonic beast's attack. She already felt that her spiritual aura was almost exhausted, so she had no choice but to grab a handful of restorative panaceas and stuff them into her mouth. With this kind of depletion speed, she was no longer afraid of wasting medicinal pills. If she couldn't survive, no matter how many medicinal pills she had, they would be useless. Use talismans. Use talismans to attack it. Tinga shouted at the dumbfounded Morongzi. This iron-teethed crocodile had thick skin and thick flesh. The layer of hard skin on its body was comparable to armor, so she simply couldn't pierce it. She could only use spells to penetrate that layer of skin and injure it. Upon hearing her shout, Morongzi regained his senses. He took out a handful of talismans and, without any regard for the consequences, slammed them all onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. These talismans contained spells of various elements: sea of fire, ice, stones, quicksand, and vines, all of them smashed onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. This time, the iron-teethed crocodile finally reacted. It raised its head and stared at Morongzi, who was flying in midair with its small eyes. It then opened its mouth and sprayed a jet of water. Morongzi was greatly alarmed. He moved sideways with great difficulty to dodge, but he was careless and came in contact with some of the water. His body unexpectedly became sluggish and he fell to the ground. Taking advantage of this moment, Tinga quickly took out the formation discs and formation flag for the disorienting formation and the spirit-trapping formation. She simply laid them down, and soon after, she waved the formation flags. Vines once again appeared in the middle of the formation, firmly binding the iron-teethed crocodile. When the iron-teethed crocodile's attention returned to her side, it discovered that the spiritual aura inside its body had become slower. In a fit of rage, it couldn't care less about the other little bug and wanted to tear the bug in front of it to shreds. However, when it crawled forward, the scene in front of it changed. It actually couldn't find the existence of that little bug, so it immediately became confused. Seeing that Murongzi still hadn't crawled back up, Tinga anxiously said, "Senior Marshal Brother Murong." As if he heard her voice, Murongzi struggled to stuff several medicinal pills into his mouth and crawled back up with great difficulty. He was already seriously injured, so it was already very difficult for him to use spirit tools and light body technique. However, he was also hit by the iron-teethed crocodile's jet of water. This was a poisonous spring, so everything in the surroundings was poisonous, let alone a demonic beast that advanced to the second rank in this place. The iron-teethed crocodile's poison was much stronger than the poisonous fog, so his injuries became even more serious. Ignoring everything else, Murongzi swallowed several healing pills to neutralize the poison and struggled to fly up. With a wave of his hand, a handful of fine flying needles flew towards the iron-teethed crocodile's eye. The iron-teethed crocodile blinked and swung its head. Some of the flying needles were flung away, while the other needles pierced the thick skin on its head. Without the slightest reaction, the needles fell down one after another. Murongzi didn't give up and continued to throw the needles. Inside the spirit-trapping formation, the iron-teethed crocodile's spiritual aura circulation became slower. In the end, the iron-teethed crocodile didn't manage to dodge the needles. With a poo sound, its eye was pierced. It instantly became furious and let out a snoring sound while facing the sky. Tinga was delighted. She immediately stuffed another handful of restorative panaceas into her mouth, then waved the formation flag. The sea of fire inside the formation smashed down, causing the ground to shake. After being attacked by several spells, the thick skin of the iron-teethed crocodile finally showed signs of being burnt. Murongzi didn't let this opportunity slip by. He once again took out his flying sword and stabbed it towards the burnt part of the iron-teethed crocodile skin. This time, the sword stabbed solidly. It broke the iron-teethed crocodile's skin and pierced deeply into its flesh. Feeling the pain, the iron-teethed crocodile swung its tail and broke a big tree next to the spring. However, it still couldn't find where those annoying little bugs were. All it could see was the poisonous spring where it had lived for several hundred years. No matter how hard it crawled, it would always crawl back to its original spot. Blood flowed out of its eyes. Its body was in great pain from being hit by spells, and there was also something stuck in its flesh. It let out a painful grunt, but it still couldn't find those two little bugs. The only thing it could see was spells continuously smashing down on it. In the end, it couldn't hold on any longer. Another spell smashed down on it, and it could no longer open its eyes. Tinga gasped for breath. Her legs went soft, and she could no longer stand and knelt down. There wasn't even a trace of spiritual aura left in her body. A second-ranked demonic beast was indeed much stronger than a first-ranked demonic beast. She could kill those dozens of demonic monkeys without the slightest danger using the 5 elements life and death formation, but this second-ranked demonic beast. She spent so much effort and ate so many medicinal pills, yet she could only trap it. If it weren't for Murongzi's help, it would have died for sure today. Murongzi lay motionless not too far from her. Just now, he practically threw out all of his talismans. Once the iron-teethed crocodile died, he fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Tinga was a bit worried. She once again swallowed a restorative panacea, barely recovering some of her spiritual aura. She then stood up with difficulty and dragged her heavy legs towards Murongzi. Senior Marshal Brother Morong. Senior Marshal Brother Morong. Morong Z lay motionlessly on the ground. There was a bloodstain on the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he vomited because his injuries were too heavy. Mo Tienga clenched her teeth, took out a small reversion pill, and stuffed it into his mouth. Right now, although she wasn't injured, her spiritual aura was completely exhausted. If any danger appeared in the short term, it would be troublesome. It was better to save his life first. After all, it would always be safer if the two of them were together. After feeding him the small reversion pill, Murongzi finally slowly regained consciousness. When he saw her, there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, the pills you gave me. Mo Tienga smiled bitterly. They were specially prepared for the sake of this trial. Now, I can only let Senior Marshal Brother take advantage of them. She didn't dare to say she had another bottle on her. Although Senior Marshal Brother Morong didn't seem like that kind of person and was Murong Yan's elder brother, they didn't have much of friendship. Murong Z didn't doubt her. His expression changed as he earnestly said, "Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. If it weren't for the medicinal pills you gave me, my injuries definitely wouldn't have lasted until tomorrow." Mo Tienga simply waved her hand. "If Senior Marshal Brother Morong doesn't want to take advantage of me, you can just return the medicinal pills to me after we leave this place. Right now, I have to treat my injuries first. Otherwise, if we run into someone again..." At this point, she suddenly wrinkled her brows. Someone was coming. Chapter 66. Mo Tienga shook her sleeves. Several things flew out and were buried in the soil. Soon after, she grabbed a few restorative spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth. After doing these two things, the figures of a few people appeared in the poisonous fog. Mo Tienga immediately tightened her grip on her greenwood sword. Morong Z, on the other hand, endured the pain and stood up. There were a total of 3 people, all of whom were 10th layer Qi refining cultivators. The one in the lead was a middle-aged cultivator, a young man about 20 years old, and an old man about 50 to 60 years old. The 3 of them didn't seem easy to deal with. Since the middle-aged cultivator was the leader, he must have the highest status or the most powerful. The young man was able to reach the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age, so he must also have some skills. As for the old man, there was no need to talk about him. He had a lot of experience, so he must be the most cunning. When he and Morong Z glanced at each other, both of them smiled bitterly. He had just experienced a bitter battle, and he had actually encountered such a combination. The 3 men stood not far away, cautiously sizing them up. Both Mo Tienga and Morong Z secretly pretended to be indifferent and tightened their grip on their flying swords. After a while, the young man couldn't help but ask, "Senior brothers, what are we waiting for?" The old man frowned and slowly said, "Be careful." They all saw the corpse of the iron-teethed crocodile on the ground. Although it was already dead, there was still a huge pressure remaining. It was obvious that it wasn't a Tier 1 demonic beast, which caused them to hesitate. For 2 people to be able to kill a second-ranked demonic beast, it was obvious that these 2 people definitely had extraordinary skills. However, they themselves were not to be trifled with, so they were unwilling to let it go just like that. It must be known that the corpse of a second-ranked demonic beast could definitely be exchanged for a foundation-building pill. Caution, consideration, fanaticism, these expressions appeared on the faces of the 3 of them in turn. He was worried that his opponent would be too strong and lose him, but at the same time, he was unwilling to let go of such a great benefit. The corpse of a second-ranked demonic beast could not only be made into a spirit tool, but it could also be made into a magic tool for foundation establishment cultivators. This was another huge fortune. The young man couldn't restrain himself and shouted, "Senior brothers, what are you hesitating for? Are we going to let them off for nothing?" The old man said, "These 2 aren't easy to deal with. Don't be rash." Finally, the 2 of them looked at the middle-aged cultivator between them. For a time, the middle-aged cultivator was also hesitant. He had no confidence in killing them, and he was unwilling to let them go. Mo Tinga hastily recalled her green wood sword, but it only managed to block the mirror. The flying sword rapidly stabbed towards Murongzi, but Murongzi barely managed to dodge it. The flying sword brushed past his shoulder, causing blood to blossom. How could the middle-aged cultivator let go of this opportunity? He quickly flew towards Murongzi, caught the flying sword, and stabbed it towards him. Mo Tinga wanted to help, but the old man's mirror was really powerful. After being blocked by her, it flew back to the old man's hand. He immediately flipped the mirror over, and a golden light shone towards her. Although she had a defensive barrier on her body, she didn't dare to block it, so she could only take back her greenwood sword to block the golden light. Right at that moment, the middle-aged cultivator had already closed in on Murongzi. Seeing that Murongzi didn't have any strength to fight back, the middle-aged cultivator revealed an evil grin and stabbed the flying sword in his hand. Pooh! The flying sword pierced deep into Murongzi's body. Blood flowed down the blade of the sword, but at the same time, the middle-aged cultivator let out a loud "ah" and let go of the sword to cover his abdomen. A flying sword pierced through his abdomen on his back. It was Murongzi's incomparably sharp flying sword mixed with iron essence. Mo Tinga's expression changed greatly, but she heard the other party shout, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang." Murongzi and the middle-aged cultivator perished together, but the other party didn't look angry. Instead, they panicked. In just a short moment, one of them was trapped and the other was killed. The old man made a prompt decision. He put away the mirror in his hand, then immediately fled into the distance. Perhaps the reason he could survive until now was because he was timid. Mo Tinga didn't chase after him. Instead, she swung her flying sword, ending the middle-aged cultivator's life, then turned towards the remaining young man. Once the young man saw the old man fleeing, his expression immediately became very unsightly. He swung the large knife in his hand, chopping the fire brambles in half and attacking Mo Tinga. Mo Tinga had never met an opponent who used spirit tools to attack like a secular martial artist, so she couldn't react in time. Fortunately, she had defensive talismans on her, so she retreated while parrying with her greenwood sword. She wanted to counterattack, but she didn't have much spiritual aura left, so she could only retreat slowly. Seeing that she didn't dare to take his attack, the other party had a complacent expression on his face as he approached step by step. Mo Tinga suddenly smiled. A formation flag appeared in her hand, and she waved it lightly. All of a sudden, with a "pa" sound, the formation flags and formation discs that were hidden suddenly stood up. The young man turned pale with fright, but he was already bewildered by the scene in front of him. Yellow sand filled the sky. It was like a desert in the far west. Apart from that, there was nothing else. This was a formation she hastily laid just now. Originally, she wasn't sure if she could use it. Fortunately, this young man was an impulsive person, so she lured him into the formation step by step. Now that he was in her formation, he was naturally at her mercy. She waved the formation flag again, and the scene changed again. Spells of the 5 elements flew towards the young man in an endless stream. The young man brandished his knife to block them, but he discovered that these spells disappeared upon contact. They were simply illusions. He was so angry that he cursed loudly. Mo Tinga once again swallowed a restorative panacea, then grabbed a talisman. She controlled her greenwood sword and attacked the young man in the formation together. The young man thought it was an illusion again, so he didn't block them. He was immediately hit solidly and couldn't be more dead. Mo Tinga heaved a sigh of relief and withdrew her greenwood sword. When she thought of Murongzi, she hastily ran back. Senior Marshal Brother Murong. She once again helped Murongzi up from the ground. Mo Tinga discovered that his breath was already very weak. He was already seriously injured. The two of them encountered the iron-teethed crocodile, and after a thrilling battle, they finally killed it. Then they encountered these 3 enemies. His abdomen was pierced through. He basically relied on his last breath to kill that middle-aged cultivator, but in the end, he couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed. Right now, his spiritual aura was exhausted, his meridians were damaged, and his dantian was also pierced through. He simply couldn't be saved. Murongzi slowly opened his eyes and said with difficulty, "Junior, Martial Brother Yi." Mo Tinga nodded. "I'm here." Murongzi spat out a mouthful of blood. Mo Tinga hastily supported him. She pressed her palm against his and channeled spiritual aura into his body. This made Murongzi feel a bit better. He showed a faint smile and said in a weak voice, "I know. I can't hold on anymore. Please do me a favor." Mo Tinga promptly nodded. "Senior Martial Brother Murong, please speak." Murongzi pulled out his Chinquan bag with difficulty and gasped for breath. "In our clan, the one with the most hope is Xiaoyan. Please give the demonic beast and the flying sword. I killed to her." He closed his eyes and said, "As for the rest, I'll give it to Junior Martial Brother as a souvenir." As he spoke, blood kept flowing out of his mouth, and he firmly held onto Mo Tinga's sleeves. Upon hearing his last words, Mo Tinga sighed inwardly. "Rest assured, Senior Martial Brother. I'll bring the things there." Murongzi smiled, but his eyes were filled with unwillingness and sorrow. He finally loosened his grip, his head tilted, and he breathed no more. Mo Tinga was stunned for a long time before she regained her composure. Although she didn't have any friendship with Murongzi, she still felt sad. This was the omnipresent death of cultivators. Not long ago, although Senior Martial Brother Murong was seriously injured, he was still talking cheerfully and full of confidence. But in the blink of an eye, he became a corpse. She wiped her face, erased this sadness, then stood up to clean up the scene. In any case, she had to continue living, building her foundation, forming her gold core, forming her nascent soul. She had to live happily. First, she removed the Chinquan bags and weapons from the 3 corpses, then burned the corpses clean. She only put Murongzi's ashes in a jade box. Soon after, she cleaned the bloodstains on her body and sorted the things in the 3 Chinquan bags. She used up a lot of her own medicinal pills and talismans, but fortunately, the 2 Zixia sect disciples still had some. All 3 of them had the corpses of demonic beasts on their bodies, but the other 2 only had 3 to 5, while Murongzi had more than 10. After pondering for a moment, she took out a Chinquan bag and put all the demonic beasts the 3 of them hunted into it. She then put all the spirit tools on Murongzi's body into the Chinquan bag. After all, she had gone through thick and thin with Murongzi and was acquainted with Murongyan. These spirit tools were useless to her, so she might as well return them to Murongyan. That is, if Murongyan was still alive. Soon after, she went to deal with the iron-teethed crocodile's corpse. This iron-teethed crocodile's carcass was a valuable material for refining tools. While she was cleaning up, she found the flying needles Murongzi left behind. These flying needles were sparkling and transparent, almost traceless. They were indeed good for sneak attacks. She then put all of them into her Chinquan bag. After she finished sorting everything and replenished her spiritual aura inside the formation, Mo Tinga decided to leave the poisonous spring. That old man from Zixia sect had escaped, so who knew if there would be anyone else coming? It would be better for her to find another place to hide. Mo Tinga couldn't help but sigh when she turned around to look at the poisonous spring. Not long ago, they were talking cheerfully and wittily, but now they were already a pile of ashes. Chapter 67. She entered the valley at 7 a.m. yesterday, so it was now 1:15 a.m. Mo Tinga calculated that she still needed 6 hours to leave the valley. A lot of things could happen in 6 hours, and a lot of people could die. She needed to be more cautious. The exit formation would be opened in the center, and the more central the area was, the more dangerous it would be. Mo Tinga thought for a long time before she decided to wander around the periphery. Once the formation opened, she would go to the center. Moreover, she had to use her divine sense at all times. Not only did she have to avoid people, but she also had to avoid demonic beasts. This was somewhat difficult, but it was still safer than staying in the poisonous spring. Who knew whether that old man from Zixia sect would call his fellow disciples or not? After all, the corpse of a second-ranked demonic beast was very attractive to aura-refining cultivators like them. In the east of this forest, there was a 300 feet tall waterfall. In the southwest, there was a high mountain. In the north, there was the cliff they came down from. In the northwest, near the cliff, was the poisonous spring. The only way to leave this forest was to the northwest of the poisonous spring. However, the poisonous spring was an extremely dangerous existence. Not only were there demonic beasts that lived in groups, but there was also a poisonous fog that filled the air. There were also unknown dangers in the deep water, so no one would think of leaving from there. Therefore, nearly 1,000 aura-refining cultivators were in this forest. Even though this forest was very large and it wasn't easy to meet friends, it wasn't difficult to meet people. An hour after leaving the poisonous spring, Imotinga had already met several groups of people. What Morongzi said was true. The three groups had already formed teams to guard against danger and to kill enemies. In order to avoid these people, she spent a lot of effort. Her breath-concealing technique was only passed down from Yi Clan's records, so it couldn't be considered brilliant. However, because the spirit-concealing jade pendant not only concealed her physique, but also had spiritual aura-gathering and purifying effects, the effects of her spells were somewhat enhanced. Because she knew her limits, she was even more cautious. Whenever she sensed someone from afar, she would immediately avoid them. Along the way, she could clearly see the fierceness of the battle. More than once, Imotinga saw traces of fights of magical powers, charred trees, cracked ground, and congealed bloodstains. Every dark red puddle on the ground perhaps represented the end of a life. Sometimes they would come across corpses that had not been disposed of. Some of them were dressed in purple, some in yellow, and some in green. The frozen expressions on their faces were all hatred and fear. Occasionally, she would see familiar faces. They were fellow disciples or sisters she had met in the sect. Fortunately, there weren't any fellow disciples that she could call friends with. Later, she gradually became numb to it. No matter what kind of marks she encountered, she could turn a blind eye to them. Nevertheless, despite being so careful, she was still discovered by the two Zixia sect disciples. With the greenwood sword guarding her side and several talismans in her other hand, Imotinga discreetly observed her surroundings. Among the two people besieging her, one was a robust man whose physique wasn't inferior to Louis Dao's, and the other was a beautiful young married woman. The young woman was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and the burly man was in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm. Moreover, both of them seemed to be very experienced in fights of magical powers. One in front of the other in the back, they blocked her way. The surrounding trees were very dense, and the two directions that the two of them were blocking were the easiest points to break through. Imotinga couldn't help but frown. It seemed escaping was impossible, so she could only kill them. However, these two people had silently surrounded her, so they might not be easy to deal with. She had to think of a way to deal with them. After sizing her up, the robust man uttered an "eh" and said, "Wife, this brat seems to be the one old man Chun mentioned." Old man Chun? Imotinga pondered for a moment. Could he be the old man from Zixia sect who ran away from the poisonous spring? However, she didn't expect the two people in front of her to be husband and wife. This young married woman's cultivation level was high, and she was beautiful, but she actually chose such a crude man whose cultivation level wasn't obvious as her Dao companion. Imotinga couldn't help but glance at the young married woman. The young married woman saw her face and said with a smile, "Husband, it's not like you don't know that old man Shun has always been timid. However, this little brother is quite handsome. What a pity." Upon hearing the young married woman praising another man's handsomeness, the robust man grunted with dissatisfaction. "Wife." The young married woman seemed to be very proud of her husband's jealousy. She covered her mouth and laughed for a while before saying, "Husband, what are you afraid of? No matter how handsome he is, won't he still die in our hands?" The robust man felt her words were reasonable. He chuckled and said, "Wife, you're right." He then turned towards Imotinga and glared at her. "Brat, hand over your life." Right after he finished speaking, Imotinga had already made her move. Her greenwood sword swiftly shot forward, but it was a feint. The raging flame talisman in her hand, which was hidden under the light of Greenwood's sword, flew out of her hand. The robust man was about to attack, but his initiative was seized. He immediately became furious and brandished the spirit tool in his hand, aiming to hit Greenwood's sword. His spirit tool was a huge iron wheel, which seemed to fit his body shape perfectly. He was quite confident in using his spirit tool to fight against Immerse. Unfortunately, Immerse's real killing move wasn't on her spirit tool. Greenwood's sword retreated after being hit. After the iron wheel repelled Greenwood's sword, it still fiercely rushed towards Immerse. At the same time, the young married woman behind her also opened an umbrella and threw it at her. Immerse didn't panic. The raging flame talisman had already arrived. With a loud bang, the robust man let out a blood-curdling scream. Just as the iron wheel and the umbrella were about to reach her, Immerse's figure suddenly disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, Immerse appeared in front of the robust man. She thrust the greenwood sword in her hand, ruthlessly stabbing the robust man's chest. The robust man let out a shrill scream before he suddenly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. "Husband!" the young married woman screamed and rushed over. Immerse used light body technique to jump and avoid the umbrella. She was able to successfully launch a sneak attack this time because her cultivation level was one layer higher than the robust man's, but the robust man still underestimated her. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was indeed the most useful trick in the cultivation world. This young married woman seemed to have deep feelings for her husband. When she realized her husband was no longer breathing, she angrily rushed towards Immerse, wishing she could tear Immerse's body into 10,000 pieces. Nevertheless, Immerse didn't plan to fight her head-on. Her enemy had obviously lost her mind, so she didn't want to die together with her. Talismans and spirit tools were continuously thrown at her. Immerse only dodged them by relying on light body technique. It wasn't until the other party was obviously so angry that she couldn't control herself that Immerse threw the greenwood sword, talismans, and a handful of seeds at her. Seeing that Immerse was using the same method to deal with her, the young married woman was furious. She patted a defensive talisman on her body and used the umbrella to block Immerse's attack. Her other hand grasped a handful of talismans and was about to throw them at Immerse, but she didn't have the chance. Before she could throw the talismans, she felt pain in her body. The hand holding the umbrella powerlessly slipped, and she fell to the ground. After confirming that the two people were dead, Immerse collected their things and dealt with their corpses. She didn't stay for even a moment and ran away. This fight of magical power seemed to go very smoothly. In just a moment, she finished dealing with the two people, but in fact her losses weren't small. In order to deal damage to that burly man, she had used up 5 or 6 flame talismans, which was equivalent to dozens of spirit stones. Moreover, she had also used a priceless invisibility talisman, which second uncle had spent a lot of money to buy. She killed the young married woman while she was panicking. It seemed like she used the same method she used to attack the burly man, but in fact, she mixed the talismans with the sparkling and translucent flying needles left by Immerse. That was why she was able to silently break through the young married woman's umbrella and defensive barrier. Although she had a lot of experience in fights of magical power, this was the best time she had ever achieved her predetermined goal. She made a decision in a split second and immediately attacked without making any mistakes. In the blink of an eye, she gained the upper hand. Immerse carefully reviewed this fight in her mind. She was in a calm and focused state, grasping all the details in her hands, making the most correct decision in a split second and hitting the target with one strike. She wanted to remember this feeling. This was the best state for fights of magical power. Someone else was in front of her. Immerse turned around, but she didn't run far before she sensed several people's breaths not too far from her. She had no choice but to restrain her breath, find a tree, jump on it, and hide herself. The first group to pass by was a mixed group of people from Jindao School and Yunwu sect. Imo Tinga didn't plan to go out and greet them. With so many people together, it would be very easy for them to be discovered, and it would also be easy for them to fight. Although it would be safer with more people, more disputes meant more chances of death. These people passed by very quickly. Imo Tinga pondered for a moment and decided not to come down. Instead, she continued to sit on the top of the tree with her breath restrained and took out the Chinquan bag she obtained just now. The seeds in her hands were already used up, but there were still a lot of talismans and medicinal pills in the Chinquan bags of these Xia sect disciples. There were also several good spirit tools. However, for aura refining disciples, spirit tools that hadn't been refined by themselves weren't easy to use and could only be used as backups. In addition, the flying needles left by Murongzi were quite useful. Controlling these flying needles required divine sense rather than spiritual aura, so aura refining cultivators couldn't use two spirit tools at the same time. If these flying needles were used well, very few aura refining disciples would be able to defend against them. After putting away the things that were useful for fighting, Imo Tinga jumped down from the tree and continued to move forward. She hadn't gone far when she was startled. There were a lot of corpses on the ground. There were disciples from all three cultivation groups. When she saw the faces of those dead Yunwu sect disciples, she realized that they were the ones who just passed by. As it turned out, they actually ran into another group of Xia sect disciples and perished together. Imo Tinga shook her head and collected these people's Chinquan bags. She then set a fire and burned all the corpses. On her way here, at least 50 to 60 people had died, and there were still many places she hadn't been to. She was afraid that after 4 hours, less than half of the people would be able to leave this place alive. Thinking up to this point, she couldn't help but sneer. Xia sect probably didn't expect this, right? Merging Yunwu sect and Jindao school resulted in the loss of countless high-level aura refining disciples. Among these people, they were the group of aura refining disciples with the highest hopes of building their foundation. As a result, the number of foundation building cultivators in the next 100 years would be greatly reduced. They wouldn't be able to become the 8th cultivation group. On the contrary, their strength would be much weaker. Therefore, she wasn't the least bit afraid of being punished for killing people, because at that time, they would discover that they couldn't afford to lose aura refining disciples. Chapter 68. In the dense forest, a figure was flying. She didn't stop until she couldn't sense the breaths of other cultivators behind her. What bad luck! Imo Tinga covered her chest with her hand. She felt the aura inside her body surging and felt very regretful. It was all because she was too careless. She thought she was very safe after laying a formation in her hiding place. As a result, the spiritual aura fluctuation of the formation was discovered by a group of people from Xia sect who planned to surround her. She was able to escape this time thanks to the several escape talismans she had and the formation that helped her resist for a while. Otherwise, if she had to face 5 or 6 people who were coming at her aggressively, she probably wouldn't even have ashes left. Her aura was a bit unstable for a while after she used the escape talisman forcefully in the encirclement. She swallowed an aura-nourishing pill and looked up at the starry sky. It seemed to be the hour of the E now. There were still more than 2 hours left before the exit formation would open. With the fierce melee, there were fewer and fewer people alive and more fighting scenes. Along the way, all she encountered were corpses, not people. Thinking of this, Imo Tinga shook her head and smiled bitterly. She didn't care about what happened to other people. It was good enough that she could save her own life. At this moment, she felt the aura inside her dantian was still unstable. She hesitated for a moment and finally found a tree with luxuriant branches and leaves. She jumped on it and restrained her aura completely. She didn't lay a formation, nor did she use her divine sense. She just quietly adjusted her aura. Although she wasn't seriously injured, if she didn't adjust her aura, it would be very disadvantageous for her if she encountered an enemy again. She didn't want to use the escape talisman again to escape, lest a minor injury turned into a serious one. As time passed, no one came to this place. It seemed that there were indeed not many cultivators alive in the forest. Tinga sighed inwardly. After experiencing several life and death battles, she felt more and more indifferent. Even death couldn't easily move her. Perhaps, after seeing it many times, she felt it wasn't a big deal. There were so many deaths on the path of cultivation. If she didn't get used to it, how could she go further on the road to immortality? She was glad that she could adapt so quickly. Her aura gradually stabilized, and she breathed a sigh of relief. There seemed to be a demonic beast nearby. She could vaguely hear its roar, but obviously, no one wanted to catch it now. The more people died, the more likely it was for the survivors to obtain the foundation-building pills. Moreover, killing others and directly obtaining the spoils of war was much faster than slowly killing them one by one. Even she herself had obtained many demonic beasts that were killed by others. The two cultivators she killed in the poisonous spring, the husband and wife who besieged her, and the group of people who perished together with her, in addition to the 20 to 30 demonic monkey corpses on her body, she basically didn't need to take out all of the demonic beast corpses to obtain a foundation-building pill. Therefore, she didn't want to cause any trouble. Just because she was used to death did not mean that she would kill. As long as others did not offend her, she would not make a move. Thinking of this, she smiled bitterly. Sure enough, he had become a cold and heartless person. All of a sudden, the sound of light footsteps entered her ears. Tinga opened her eyes. She didn't use her divine sense, so she didn't notice him until he came close. Then, through the branches and leaves, he vaguely saw several pairs of feet. It seemed like there were 3 people, 2 men and a woman. The woman's footsteps were staggering, which was very strange. She tilted her head, but didn't move. She continued to hide. In a situation where she couldn't even protect herself, it was better not to meddle in other people's business. The voices of these people came from below. Big brother, why did you walk for so long? This voice was very young and sounded very impatient. Another voice, which was slightly lower, answered, How would I know? Hey, stinky girl, you're not lying to us, are you? Cough, cough. The woman's coughs rang out. Tinga couldn't help but frown. This voice, Senior Marshal Brothers, why are you so anxious? Can't you sense the demonic beast's spiritual aura? That demonic beast is guarding that vermilion heartfruit tree. It was Morong Yan's voice. This answer seemed to have been muddled. The younger one said, What you said seems to be reasonable. As the footsteps gradually faded away, Tinga muttered to herself for a moment, then quietly slipped down from the tree and quietly followed them. The cultivation levels of these 2 male cultivators couldn't be considered high. One was in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, while the other was in the 9th layer. They actually survived until now and were even together with Morong Yin. Moreover, based on their conversation, it seemed they wanted Morong Yin to take them to find some vermilion heart fruit. She had never heard of this kind of spiritual fruit. Could it be some kind of mystical fruit? Tinga shook her head and denied this idea. If it really was some kind of mystical fruit, Morong Yin should have gone to pick a long time ago. Why would she wait until now? She must have been caught by these 2 men and used those words to deceive them. Tinga quietly approached them and carefully observed the situation. Sure enough, Morong Yan's hands were tied and her body was injured. The 2 male cultivators were Zixia sect cultivators. One was in his 20s while the other was in his 20s. They soon found the demonic beast's location. Soon after, she saw the 2 men fly into a rage and pull out their spirit tools. Stinky girl, you actually dare to deceive us brothers. However, Morong Yin was also very quick-witted. She desperately dodged to the side and cleverly startled the demonic beast. She then hid behind the 2 men, and the demonic beast pounced on them. This demonic beast was a first-rank giant ape. Although its cultivation level wasn't obvious, its skin was thick and its flesh was extremely strong. For a moment, the 2 men's hands and feet were tied down by it. Seeing this, Morong Yin quietly retreated. Taking advantage of the fact that the two men weren't paying attention, she hastily ran backwards. "Big brother, this whore wants a run." The younger one fiercely stared at Murong Yan's back. The older one used his spirit tool to block the giant ape's attack and shouted, "Chase after her. She actually deceived us. We can't let her run away." "All right." The younger one withdrew his spirit tool and chased after the giant ape. After barely blocking the giant ape's attack once again, the man muttered, "This won't do. She's too strong. It seems I have to use a treasure." With that thought in mind, he took out a pigeon egg-sized purple ball from his robe and threw it at the giant ape. With a loud boom, the giant ape was instantly blasted into a bloody mess. The rocks and trees in the vicinity were all blown away, raising the area within a radius of 30 meters to the ground. The man felt a bit of heartache as he watched the bloody mess. There wasn't a single piece of flesh left on the ground. It was unclear whether he was feeling heartache for the corpse that couldn't be pieced back together or the treasure he used. After feeling heartache for a while, he clenched his teeth and turned around to chase after his younger brother. However, he only ran a few steps when he heard his younger brother's miserable scream. Startled, he hurriedly ran forward. "Third brother! Third brother!" Before long, he found his younger brother lying on the ground, and there was no one around him. Tinga pulled Murong Yin and ran madly. She only stopped when she could no longer sense that person's breath. Murong Yin looked at her gratefully. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, thank you. Fortunately, I met you. Otherwise," Tinga shook her head and said with a smile, "Senior Marshal Sister Murong, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing." She paused for a moment, then asked curiously, "Senior Marshal Sister, what happened?" Tinga's question made Murong Yin smile bitterly. She shook her head and said, "It's all because I didn't like cultivating before. This time, I really suffered a lot. I ran into Zixia sect's disciples several times, but every time, I narrowly escaped. Later, I ran into them. They wanted to kill me, but I lied to them that there was a strange plant here. Sure enough, it was like that." Tinga nodded. "What was that thing in that person's hand? How could it be so powerful?" "About that, I'm also not very clear. Spirit tools don't seem like spirit tools, and magic weapons don't seem like magic weapons. It seems to be a kind of special object refined from the soul of demonic beasts and a lightning spell. Once it's thrown with spiritual aura, it will explode. Its power is extremely powerful. From what I've seen, no one can withstand it." This was Tinga's first time seeing this thing. Its power was indeed enormous. Perhaps no aura-refining cultivator could withstand it, so she chose to run. After all, she didn't want to lose her life. When she saw Murong Yin, Tinga couldn't help but think of Murong Zi. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still decided to think about it after they got out. Danger was everywhere now. If she suddenly found out that her elder brother had died, she was afraid her emotions would fluctuate and affect the fight of magical powers. Tinga asked, "Senior Marshal Sister Murong, what do you plan to do next?" Upon hearing Tinga's question, Murong Yin showed a bitter smile. "I won't hide it from Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Before I came here, I was full of ambition and was determined to fight for a foundation-building pill. Only now do I realize that I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I don't have any regrets now. I just hope to get out of here safely. In the future, I'll cultivate diligently before thinking about other things." Tinga nodded inwardly upon hearing what Murong Yin said. It seemed Murong Yin really understood. This was good. Murong Zi's painstaking efforts weren't wasted. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Murong Yin hesitated for a while, but in the end, she still shook her head. "Forget it. We'll talk about it if I can get out of here alive. I'll take my leave first." Tinga was stunned. "Senior Marshal Sister Murong, you're not coming with me?" Murong Yin suddenly turned her head. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you don't mind coming with me?" Tinga was dumbfounded for a moment before she finally reacted. Could it be that Murong Yin thinks I won't be willing to go with her? Tinga immediately smiled and said, "What do you think, Senior Marshal Sister?" Upon seeing Tinga's expression, Murong Yin smiled embarrassedly. I was thinking too much. The two of them smiled at each other. The estrangement caused by the changes in the school during this period of time instantly disappeared. Murong Yin's expression was no longer stiff. Instead, she looked a little more relaxed. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I really underestimated you in the past. I never expected that your spells would actually be this powerful. I was indeed too lazy before. Mo Tinga teased her. Senior Marshal's sister, it's good that you know you're lazy. I know my innate talent isn't good, so I have no choice but to work hard. She looked at the starry sky again. It was already the hour of the morning. There's still 2 hours left. Senior Marshal's sister, we can get closer to the center. A hesitant expression appeared on Murong Yan's face. Are we going now? There should be a lot of people going to the center. Shouldn't we avoid them? Mo Tinga said, rest assured, we're close to the opening of the exit. Everyone wants to leave, so they definitely don't want to cause trouble. It'll actually be a bit safer than before. What Mo Tinga said was reasonable, so Murong Yin finally decided to believe her. She said straightforwardly, then I'll let Junior Marshal Brother Yi decide. I'll go with you. Mo Tinga nodded. Senior Marshal's sister, how are your injuries? Are you okay with hurrying along? Murong Yin said, they're fine. They're just minor injuries. Since Murong Yin was sure, Mo Tinga didn't hesitate. Then let's go. The two of them used the light body technique and hurried towards the center. The closer they got to the center, the more people there were. Murong Yin felt very uneasy. She asked in a low voice, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you really okay? Mo Tinga pulled her hand and gave her a smile. I'm fine. Trust me. Murong Yan's face suddenly turned red. In the end, she nodded. Mo Tinga, however, didn't notice. She was still holding Murong Yan's hand and rushing towards the exit. Chapter 69. There was a huge open space in the center of the forest. Many cultivators from the three groups had gathered around the open space. They were all staring at each other with vigilance. Mo Tinga arrived with Murong Yin. Everyone's gaze fell on them, but no one dared to make a move because they were afraid of breaking the balance. Although there were many Zixia sect disciples present, everyone cherished their lives. The disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school also didn't dare to make a move when they were obviously at a disadvantage. Otherwise, it would be too much of a loss if they lost their lives before killing their enemies. Without caring about these people's gazes, Mo Tinga found a corner close to her fellow disciples and pulled Murong Yin over. Seeing that the two of them were motionless, these people moved their gazes away from them and stared at the newcomers. Mo Tinga cautiously scanned the surroundings. Sure enough, Zixia sect's main branch suffered heavy losses. There were less than 100 people present, including those who hadn't arrived yet. There were probably no more than 200. There were about 60 to 70 people from Yunwu sect and Jindao school. All of them were covered in blood and had fierce gazes. Among the people she knew, only Jiang Shanghong was present. Obviously, he had also experienced a bitter battle. Now he found a place to meditate. As for the others, Qin Shi, Lu Yidao, and Su Jingji, none of them were present. Mo Tinga frowned slightly. She was a bit worried. Based on the number of people present, perhaps more than half of the cultivators died this time. She really couldn't be sure that those 3 people were still alive. At that moment, Murong Yin gently pulled her sleeve and whispered, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Seeing her pale face, Mo Tinga showed a comforting smile. Don't worry. In this place, Murong Yin knew that her methods and insight were inferior to Mo Tinga's, so she obediently listened to her. Mo Tinga looked up at the sky. The sky was already turning white. It was almost dawn. Once dawn arrived, the exit formation would appear here, and they would be able to leave. Mo Tinga picked up a clean patch of grass and pulled Murong Yin to sit down. She seemed to be meditating and adjusting her breath like everyone else, but in fact, she was secretly observing the surroundings. She believed that many people present were as vigilant as she was. At the last moment, no one wanted to throw their lives away. Another group of Zixia sect cultivators arrived. Mo Tinga swept her gaze over them and frowned. She found that the old man who ran away from the poisonous spring was among them. However, she did not intend to take any action. Firstly, even though they had fought once, there was no enmity between them. Secondly, once she made a move, the balance would be broken. She still wanted to return alive. The old man also noticed her, and a look of surprise flashed across his face. Seeing that they actually blocked it, the blockhead shouted angrily and wanted to rush towards them again. Since she almost lost her life, how could Mo Tienga be polite to him? She immediately used an ice-condensing talisman. Murong Yin also didn't stay idle. She also rushed forward with her spirit tool. She released a raging flame art. Although the blockhead's abilities weren't low, he couldn't withstand the three people's joint attack. In order to dodge the ice-condensing talisman, he was hit by Qin Shi's spell. His movements were a step too slow, so he was immediately hit by Murong Yan's spirit tool. He staggered and fell to the ground. Seeing that he was completely dead, the three of them heaved sighs of relief. The power of this purple ball was indeed extraordinary. Aside from them, the people around them were also caught in the crossfire. Some people were even badly mutilated by the explosion. Only a few people managed to block the impact. The dead and injured were all disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school. Although the instigator was already dead, each and every one of them was furious. They raised their spirit tools and rushed towards the Zixia sect disciples. Zixia sect disciples also had the advantage in numbers, so how could they be willing to show weakness? They also rushed forward. Spells and spirit tools were flying everywhere in the sky. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Qin Shi waved at them after dealing with a sneak attack. Mo Tienga was on guard as she pulled Murong Yin closer to him. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, thank you. Don't thank me so quickly. He took out a bunch of talismans as if they were free and gave them to the two of them. Hold on for a while. The exit will open in about a quarter of an hour. Mo Tienga also knew that this wasn't the time to be polite. She took the talismans he handed her, then turned around and threw a raging flame talisman at the Zixia sect disciples who were rushing towards them. This battle royale had the largest number of participants since the start of the day and night. It was also the most intense one. Spells, talismans, and spirit tools were flying everywhere. It was hard to tell whether they were on their own side or the enemy's side. They couldn't even dodge and could only use spells and talismans to resist. In the end, the three of them had no choice but to stick a defensive talisman on each of them to resist all kinds of attacks. Eventually, a white light shone in the center of the open space. This white light became brighter and brighter until it slowly formed the shape of a formation. It was overflowing with light and vibrant colors, and it was full of spiritual aura. Everyone's gazes were attracted by the formation. Even the fighting stopped. In a flash, everyone rushed towards the formation like a swarm of bees. Mo Tienga intentionally retreated a bit, but the people behind her also rushed forward. A group of people rushed towards the formation in a chaotic manner. Soon, they were squeezed into the formation. The scene in front of them changed. Mo Tienga raised her head. With a glance, she saw the three core formation cultivators with ashen complexions. Disciples came out of the cliff one after another. Almost every one of them was covered in blood and looked miserable. Some of them were even seriously injured. Murong Yin, who was next to her, leaned towards her and whispered, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi." Mo Tienga shook her head and whispered back, "Don't worry." Although these core formation cultivators had ashen complexions, they didn't have any killing intent, so they probably wouldn't attack them. Besides, after the last battle royale, perhaps only 1/3 of the original disciples would come out alive. If they still had to be punished, they might as well recruit new disciples. Once they left the murderous environment and didn't need to be vigilant, Mo Tienga felt exhausted all over. Her body tilted and she almost fell down. But when she turned her head, she saw Murong Yin staring at the formation with rapt attention. Mo Tienga's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered she hadn't told him about Murongzi. Senior Marshal's sister Murong. Murong Yin answered softly but didn't look at her. She was still staring at the formation. Mo Tinga took a deep breath. She suddenly hated herself for telling such cruel news. In fact, I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong. Upon hearing this, Murong Yin suddenly turned her head. Mo Tinga clenched her teeth and said, Senior Marshal Brother Murong has passed away. Murong Yin was dumbfounded. She seemed to be in disbelief, but soon her face gradually turned pale. She suddenly grabbed Mo Tinga's hand and said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, can you say that again? Mo Tinga sighed and repeated, I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong. He's already passed away. Murong Yan's face turned pale, but she didn't let go of her hand. Instead, she stared at Mo Tinga and asked, Junior Marshal Brother, do you have any proof? This time, Mo Tinga didn't say anything. She just handed Murong Zi's Chinquan bag to her. Murong Yin took it with trembling hands and opened it eagerly. When she saw those familiar spirit tools, she finally looked sad and let go of her hands to cover her face. Although she wasn't responsible for Murong Zi's death, he died while they were fighting against the enemy. Mo Tinga felt very uncomfortable seeing Murong Yin so sad. She patted her shoulder and shook his head. He seemed to be comforting her that this wasn't her responsibility. She forced a smile, but she didn't feel any better. Senior Marshal's sister, don't be sad. Senior Marshal Brother always wanted you to build your foundation. At this point, she couldn't continue speaking. How could a few dry words of comfort compare to the sadness of losing a loved one? After a long time, Murong Yin finally put down her hands. There were no tears on her face. Her face was pale, and her expression was gloomy. She used to be a charming and lovely girl, but after a series of blows recently, she was no longer as bright and beautiful as before. I'm sorry, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. It's not that I don't believe you, but I understand. Mo Tinga took out a jade box and handed it to her. This is Senior Marshal Brother Murong's ashes. Senior Marshal's sister, don't be too sad. The dead are gone, so you should live better. Murong Yin accepted the jade box and the Chinquan bag. A sad smile appeared on her face as she said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please tell me how my big brother died. Mo Tinga said, Senior Marshal Brother Murong and I happened to run into each other. He was attacked by someone and was seriously injured. While he was still recuperating, we ran into a second-rank iron-teeth crocodile. Then we ran into 3 other people. In the end, Senior Marshal Brother Murong couldn't hold on any longer and died together with one of them. Mo Tinga simply explained, but she was still worried and emphasized, Senior Marshal's sister, don't think about revenge. This hatred can't be settled. How could Murong Yin not understand this? It was just that she always felt unwilling. After a long time, she reached out to wipe the remaining tears on her face and said with a determined expression, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, don't worry. I'm no longer the insensible me from before. I know what I should do. Soon after, she laughed self-mockingly and said, although we weren't biological siblings, Big Brother always doted on me. No matter what I wanted, he always thought of a way to get it for me. Now, he thought of a way to get me foundation-building pills, but I never expected the price would be his life. Chapter 70. The development of the matter was just as Mo Tinga expected. The person who came up with this idea originally thought it would be an opportunity for the disciples of the 3 groups to communicate, but he didn't expect it would turn into an opportunity to kill each other. Because of this, the nascent Soul Grandmaster of Zixia sect flew into a rage and almost killed the person who came up with this idea. However, it was already a long time before these aura-refining disciples learned about this. On the day they finished their test, the 3 core formation Grandmasters were livid. After hearing the disciples' reports, they sent several foundation-building disciples to clean up the mess. These foundation-building disciples found some seriously injured aura-refining disciples and also reported the tragic situation left behind in the mountain forest. Soon after, the core formation grandmasters discussed something, but they didn't say anything. They just took them back to the sect and ordered them not to go down the mountain. After Senior Marshal Brother Zhou inquired about it, he told them not to worry and finally appeased some people. During this test, their courtyard lost a lot of people. Mo Tianga's house was considered good. Out of 5 people, 4 came out alive. The one who didn't come out was Su Jingji. Lu Dao was seriously injured, but in the end, he still survived. Su Jingji, on the other hand, disappeared. No one knew who killed him or where his body and ashes were. There was no trace of him. In this disaster, many people disappeared like this, but they didn't expect Su Jingji to be one of them. After receiving confirmation, Su clan's people came to clean up his things. Thus, Su Jingji's traces completely disappeared from this house. Soon after, the sect head announced the results of this test. Just as they guessed, there was no investigation or disposal. Instead, he directly announced the distribution of foundation-building pills. In this test, no more than 100 Yunwu sect disciples came out alive, but 40 of them obtained foundation-building pills. Reportedly, because the elite disciples suffered heavy losses, the nascent Soul Grandmaster of Zixia sect decided to distribute more foundation-building pills, hoping to produce more foundation-building cultivators among them to make up for this loss. The 4 people in Mo Tianga's house, including Murong Yin, were among them. However, this news didn't make Mo Tianga happy. Murong Zi's death and Su Jingji's disappearance made her feel unprecedentedly lost. She remembered Su Jingji's irritable appearance before the test that day. In fact, she had a bad premonition that day, but she didn't think too much about it. She never expected it would be an eternal farewell. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, Mo Tianga, who was leaning against a tree, raised her head and saw Qin. She's standing in front of her with a wine bottle in his hand. She forced a smile and took it. Qin, she also sat down next to her, and the two of them drank in silence. It was an autumn afternoon. The sunlight seeped through the leaves and shone on the body, making people lazy and unwilling to move. The surroundings were quiet, and only the distant waterfall added a little liveliness. Thinking back to a month ago, there were 8 people chatting here, a group of people ordering her around. But now, Su Jingji was dead, Lu Dao was seriously injured, Wang Qinyi was married far away, Xin Bing used her beauty to seduce people, Murong Yin was determined to cultivate assiduously, and Senior Marshal Brother Zhou was busy with his future. The only one who could come here and sit with her was Qin Shi. Senior Brother Qin. If you build your foundation, what will you do? Of course, it's to continue cultivating. Why do you ask? Mo Tianga shook her head. She couldn't tell why she was feeling so vexed. I just don't understand. What's the purpose of cultivating in the end? What was the purpose of cultivation? 80% of the people in the cultivation world would answer this question without hesitation, to live a long life. But what was the purpose of living a long life? Fighting each other like this, causing countless deaths and injuries. For the sake of living a long life, why didn't they care about life at all? Qin Shi thought about it seriously, but he didn't answer. He just shook his head and slowly talked about something irrelevant. I was born in a noble family in the secular world. However, because I was from a branch family, I was never valued and was always bullied by others. I don't know why, but ever since I was a child, I felt that I was different from others. I didn't want to fight for favor with my brothers, and I didn't have any interest in playing. I only focused on studying. When I was 8 years old, a guest came to our manor. He was said to be our ancestor, and he seemed to be an extraordinary person. He was already several hundred years old, but he didn't look old at all. In front of him, even the most dignified clan master didn't dare to utter a word. Then I was brought to him. After he tested my spiritual roots, he told the elders that he wanted to take me away. At that time, I was still young and didn't know what I was looking forward to. I just suddenly felt that maybe this was the path I wanted to walk. At this point, he turned around and smiled. Sure enough, my premonition was correct. I walked on a completely different path from my brothers in the manor. I'm still young now, but those brothers and sisters of mine have already turned into dust. Why do we cultivate? I can't answer this question. For me, cultivating is a natural part of my life. I don't need to ask why. I just want to walk on this path. His quiet narration made Mo Tienga feel very calm. His experiences had also allowed her to see herself in him. Just want to walk on this path. Is that it? She pressed her forehead and said in a low voice, I don't know why I walked on this path. I was young and intelligent, so I knew how to read people's faces. I was used to the fickleness of human nature, and I always felt pain in my heart. At that time, I only hated myself for knowing these things and why I couldn't be like other children. Later, when I met second uncle, I realized I was really different from other children. Cultivation? I also don't know why, but second uncle told me that without strength, there's no freedom. Without strength, there's no freedom. Chin, she murmured and repeated. His gaze on her suddenly had a lot of complicated feelings. Mo Tienga threw the bottle of wine away after she finished it. In fact, she never drank because she wasn't in the mood and didn't have a chance. Second uncle didn't drink because he said that cultivators couldn't indulge in worldly things, so she also thought the same. However, this feeling of drinking wine made her feel very comfortable. Senior Marshal Brother Chin, that elder of yours should have left you by now, right? Chin, she paused but didn't say anything. In fact, second uncle's lifespan is almost up. If it's not this year, it'll be next year. Sometimes I think I can accept it calmly, but sometimes I find it hard to imagine. If second uncle is gone, what should I do? If I'm like Senior Marshal Brother Sue, suddenly disappearing without even saying goodbye, what should I do? She hugged herself and buried her head in her arms, not daring to continue. Chin, she wanted to pat her shoulder, but he hesitated and his hand didn't fall. In the end, he said, I'm different from you. In fact, my aptitude isn't the best, but I've never encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. Great-grandfather said that maybe I was born to cultivate, so I don't have any obsessions or ties. In other words, I don't have superfluous feelings. I can't understand how you feel, but I know you have a heavy attachment to your feelings. If you can't let go, you won't have any achievements in the future. Mo Tienga was stunned. Obsession. Chin, she sighed and finally patted her shoulder. This is all I can say. Whether you can do it or not, it's up to you. Cultivation. Maybe for you, there are a lot of things you have to give up. Mo Tienga thought hard. Obsession. Because I've longed for too much since I was a child. I have an obsession? She seemed to understand, but she was also a bit confused. Chin, she handed her another bottle of wine. Don't think too much. If you could figure it out so easily, it wouldn't be an obsession. This requires fated chances, so take your time. After drinking another bottle of wine, her head became even more dizzy. In a daze, she heard Chin, she teasing her. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you've never drunk wine before? Who drinks it like water like you do? In a daze, Mo Tienga raised her head and saw that there seemed to be several Chin's eyes swaying in front of her. She tilted her head and reached out to hold his head. Senior, Marshal Brother Chin, what's wrong? Do you know? Phantom technique? Chin, she was stunned for a moment. Then he burst into laughter. In the end, he laughed so hard that he hit the ground. If I knew this earlier, I would have made you drink earlier. Unexpectedly. Mo Tienga stared at him for a while, then stood up and walked unsteadily towards the water. Chin, she shouted from behind her, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, what do you want to do? She was still swaying as she walked. Wash my face. She walked to the edge of the pool and crouched down. When she saw her reflection in the water, she was suddenly stunned. She hadn't paid attention to her appearance for a long time. Today, she finally realized that it was very different from what she remembered. Her originally sparse eyebrows now had eyebrows. The outline of her face seemed to have deepened, and her cheeks were plump. She already had the appearance of an adult. Although her head was still muddled, she was still frightened because her face looked more and more like a woman's. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you done? Hearing the voice behind her, she hurriedly held the water to wash her face, but the face she saw was still bright and beautiful. She was afraid she would discover her, so she didn't dare to look back. She panicked and thought, Could it be that someone has noticed me? Junior Marshall Brother Yi. Her foot slipped, and she suddenly lost her balance and fell into the pool with a plop. Junior Marshall Brother Yi. This scene made she dumbfounded. After a while, he saw Mo Tinga struggling in the water, so he finally regained his composure. He sprang up and instantly grabbed her, who was floating in the water, and went back to the shore. He couldn't help but shake his head. Junior Marshall Brother Yi, you've really drunk yourself silly. As a cultivator, you actually drowned. Where's your light body technique? He looked down and felt even more helpless. This wasn't just an ordinary kind of silly. She actually choked on water and fainted. She put Mo Tinga down under the tree. He thought for a moment, then raised his hand. In his hand was a bright-colored peach branch. The peach blossoms were still blooming, and there was dew in the center of the stamen, as if they had just been plucked from the tree. He muttered a few words in a low voice. Finally, he waved his hand and shouted, "Go." Soon after, the two of them disappeared into thin air. From Shi's point of view, the two of them were still in their original place. It was just that there was a faint light barrier surrounding this small area. He lowered his head to look at the unconscious Mo Tinga. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. After a long time, he stretched his hand to her wet neck and felt around. Soon, he pulled out a jade pendant strung with a red string. It was a round jade pendant with a warm color and clear cloud patterns. He sighed. Sure enough. Chapter 71. When Mo Tinga woke up from her sleep, she felt a splitting headache. She propped herself up. The room was dark, so she rubbed her head in a daze. Strange, how did I fall asleep? She sat up and circulated her energy to cultivate a small circle. Only then did her head stop hurting. She also slowly remembered what happened before she fell asleep. No, it should be before she got drunk. How shameful. She never drank before, yet she tried to drown her sorrows with alcohol. The worst thing was that she actually forgot herself after getting drunk. She groaned and fell back. Fortunately, there was only Senior Marshall Brother Chin at that time, so no one saw Senior Marshall Brother Chin. She hurriedly sat up and touched her body. Fortunately, her clothes were intact, and the psychic jade pendant was still there. She breathed a sigh of relief, but she felt a bit regretful. She didn't remember what happened before she got drunk. She only vaguely remembered that she told her to let go of her obsession to continue on the path of cultivation, but she felt like she forgot something she thought for a long time, but she really couldn't remember, so she simply ignored it. Since she couldn't remember, it wasn't important. What was important was that she had to warn herself that she couldn't relax her vigilance like this again. Fortunately, she didn't do anything to her. Otherwise, her secret might have been exposed if it was someone else. With this thought in mind, she got out of bed to freshen up. She then took out several moonstones from her chinquin bag and threw them on the bed. The room instantly became bright. Although her clothes were intact, they were wrinkled and smelled of alcohol. Mo Tinga frowned and walked to the washstand in the corner. She then took off her coat and wiped her face. When the smell of alcohol dissipated, she took out her new clothes and put them on. She was about to untie her hair and comb it again when she suddenly saw her reflection in the bronze mirror. She froze. She thought for a moment, picked up the comb, scattered her hair, carefully parted it, and coiled it into a bun. During this process, her hair was combed crookedly several times because of her rusty technique. When she finished, she couldn't help but smile bitterly at herself in the mirror. She hadn't dressed as a woman for almost 10 years, and she didn't even know how to comb her hair. The person in the mirror was unpleasant no matter how she looked at it. She then scattered her hair again and combed it into an ordinary Taoist bun. However, the face in the mirror was still too handsome for a man. After thinking for a while, she rummaged through her chinquin bag and found a few things. First, he used a long black strip to thicken his eyebrows. Then he poured out some gray powder from a jade bottle and smeared it on his nose, the corners of his eyes, and his lower jaw. Now that she looked at the person in the mirror, she noticed that he had sharper facial features and thicker eyebrows. He looked more like a man. He carefully erased some of the traces before putting the items away. These 2 items were actually smithing materials. But since they weren't poisonous, it wouldn't matter if he used them to wipe his face. The most important thing was that the foundation-building pill was right in front of him, so he had to be a bit more careful. Once she was done with everything, she returned to the bedside and took out her chinquin bag from inside her robe. She tidied it up, then sat down cross-legged to cultivate. Actually, she had gained many things from this trial. Just the corpses of the demonic beasts were already a great fortune. There were also pills, spirit tools, and all kinds of materials. Just the spirit stones alone amounted to over 1,000 pieces. Emotinga felt quite conflicted after she returned. Working hard for several years wasn't as good as killing a few people. Fortunately, she suppressed the injustice in her heart in time. If she ignored this ruthless thought, it would lead her to become a devil in the future. Unknowingly, several hours passed. The sky outside was already bright. Emotinga withdrew her spiritual aura, jumped out of bed, tidied up her clothes, opened the door, and walked out. Outside the hall, she was sitting in his usual position, drawing talismans. When he heard her voice, he didn't even raise his head. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you finally woke up. Thinking about yesterday, Emotinga felt a bit uneasy. Seeing that his expression wasn't abnormal, she finally felt relieved and said, "What's wrong?" To get the foundation-building pill. She put away his brush and paper. When he turned his head, he was stunned. His reaction made Emotinga a bit nervous. Was the makeup on my face too obvious? After a while, she shook his head. I'm really muddle-headed. I feel like you're a bit different today, but I can't see what's different. Emotinga felt a bit relieved. She smiled dryly. How could it be? Aren't we getting the foundation-building pill? Let's go. She nodded. The 2 of them walked out together. While walking behind them, Emotinga secretly wiped her sweat. Originally, the 4 of them always moved together in this room. Now that Su Jingji wasn't here and Lu Yidao was being treated by the foundation-building seniors in the North Peak because of his serious injuries, this room suddenly became a lot more deserted. If this wasn't the case, she wouldn't necessarily be so close to her. It was only because the others were gone that they had no one to talk to except each other. The south peak of Mount Yunwu was still the same as before. The morning light shone faintly and a cool breeze caressed their faces. However, 2 of the people who used to travel with them were missing. Emotinga sighed softly. He then coughed and said with a hoarse voice, "Shout he on. You're not injured, are you?" "I'm fine." Emotinga hastily shook her head and sat on the small stool beside the bed. She then took out the jade bottle containing the foundation-building pill and said happily, "Second uncle, look, I got the foundation-building pill." Seeing the jade bottle, Yi Jiang took it with trembling hands. He opened the jade bottle and sniffed it. He then closed his eyes and nodded. "Yes, this is the foundation-building pill. Shout on, you've worked hard." Emotinga repeatedly shook her head. "I'm just lucky. There was an accident in this test, so it was much easier to distribute the foundation-building pills." Yi Jiang showed a loving smile and looked at her with pity. "Do you think second uncle doesn't know what happened? You, forget it. It's good that you came out alive." His reproachful tone was actually warm and caring. She held second uncle's already withered hand and smiled sincerely. "Second uncle, you don't have to worry. I'm very powerful now. I diligently cultivate every day, and I've also learned how to fight against others. I won't be soft-hearted anymore. Second uncle, I'm telling you, in this test." After spending 2 hours, Emotinga rambled on about what happened in this test. Yi Jiang smiled as he listened. Sometimes he praised her for her calmness in handling things, and other times he gave her careful pointers, telling her how to handle things better. Emotinga felt she gained more from this conversation than she did from her own experience. With this thought in mind, she felt a bit depressed. If it wasn't for second uncle, what would she do? When she finished talking, Yi Jiang sighed and said, "Shout on, you've really grown up from the way you handled things this time." Second uncle is relieved. Even if you can't build your foundation this time, you're still young. It shouldn't be a problem for you to try a few more times. His words were like his last words. Mo Tienga bit her lip, grabbed second uncle's hand, and whispered, "Second uncle." How could Yi Jiang not know what she was thinking? He smiled and stroked her head. Don't be like this. You're already an adult. You don't need second uncle by your side. If you form your gold core one day, go back to the Yi clan in the secular world and see if there are any descendants with spiritual roots. If there are, you don't need to rebuild the Yi clan. You can just pass down cultivation techniques. Second uncle, she shouted angrily. Yi Jiang's expression turned serious, and he said sternly, "Shout Heon, it's not that you don't have to face it if you don't mention it. You have to remember that you're a cultivator, and a female cultivator at that. If you can't even accept reality, how can you go on? It's much more difficult for a female cultivator to achieve something than a male cultivator. Your aptitude isn't outstanding, and you don't have any clan elders to rely on. If you don't have a firm heart, you might as well give up early." Second uncle had never spoken to her in such a harsh tone. Mo Tienga was stunned. She lowered her head, but didn't say anything. Yi Jiang softened his tone. "Do you still remember what second uncle has taught you all these years? You don't have good aptitude, and you don't have a backer, so you have to be stricter with yourself. You can't be weak, you can't be greedy, and you can't indulge in emotions. You have to remember that weakness and passion are the enemies of female cultivators. Not only today, but you also have to calmly accept second uncle's death. If you fall in love with him in the future, you have to restrain yourself. You have to know that people are fickle and the world is unpredictable." How could she not know this? But Yi Jiang once again closed his eyes and revealed a calm smile. Life and death are part of the heavenly Tao's reincarnation cycle. You and I are both cultivators, so we should understand the principle that the heavenly Tao's cycle is endless. Cultivators, and only when you cultivate the heavenly Tao can you become a true immortal. Go back and carefully comprehend it. When you can calmly face second uncle's death, you can come see me again." Mo Tienga was silent. After a long time, she finally gave him the medicinal pills, bid him farewell, and left. Weakness and passion are the enemies of female cultivators. The heavenly Tao's cycle is endless. Only when you cultivate the heavenly Tao can you become a true immortal. Mo Tienga stood in the courtyard and closed her eyes for a moment before she resolutely walked out. Chapter 72. After obtaining the foundation-building pill, Qin Shi really did as he said and went into closed-door meditation to make a breakthrough. On the north peak of Mount Yunwu, there were some places with especially abundant spiritual aura. Most of these places were the Immortals' Caves of high-level cultivators, but there were also a few places that were opened as public Immortals' Caves. The so-called public Immortals' Cave was an Immortals' Cave that everyone could use. However, they would have to pay a considerable amount of rent to the sect. However, if it was for the sake of building one's foundation, it would be completely free, and one would even have priority. These public Immortals' Caves were protected by formations both inside and outside, and there were also foundation-building cultivators guarding them in shifts. Under normal circumstances, unless the time limit for closed-door meditation was over a year, no one would be disturbed at all. It was indeed the best place for closed-door meditation to attack the foundation-building realm. Going into seclusion to build his foundation would take at least 3 to 5 months, and at most a year. The first 2 months were used to nourish his body. Then, he would eat a foundation establishment pill and spend a few more months to absorb and adapt to it. If he built his foundation, he would have to spend more time to stabilize his cultivation. Whether Qin Shi succeeded or failed, it would take him a year and a half before he could come out of closed-door meditation. Mo Tienga, on the other hand, didn't think much of it. She was just envious and bored. What she envied was that before Qin Shi left, his expression was calm and without the slightest bit of worry. He seemed to be very confident, so he must have learned some kind of secret technique. As for Mo Tienga, she herself still had to spend a year or two to reach the peak stage of the aura refining realm and increase her chances of building her foundation. What was boring was that Qin wasn't here, so she had no one to talk to. Lu Yidao's injuries were quite heavy, so he would have to stay in the North Peak for at least 3 to 5 months. Mu Rongyan, with the help of her clan, also went to a public immortal's cave to enter closed-door meditation in order to advance to the peak stage of the aura refining realm. There was another person whom she was slightly familiar with, senior Marshall Brother Zhou. However, just like Qin, he also obtained a foundation-building pill and went to a public immortal's cave to enter closed-door meditation in order to advance to the foundation-building realm. If he wasn't too unlucky and ended up in the 12th layer of the aura refining realm, he would have been Marshal Uncle Zhou in the future. As for Jiang Shanghong, who was the only one left in the room, she simply didn't count him among her acquaintances. Ever since the matter of the school being annexed happened, not only did this guy ignore her, but he also became even more gloomy. Speaking of which, it was strange. When Jiang Shanghong first entered the school, he was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Now that she had gone into closed-door meditation to make a breakthrough, why didn't he make any movements? Of course, she wouldn't ask Jiang Shanghong out of curiosity. After all, they weren't friends. Actually, after this trial, if she wanted to go to a public cave for closed-door meditation, she also had money. From the cosmos bags he obtained, there were more than 1,000 spirit stones. The demonic beasts he hunted were sold for another 1,000 spirit stones. In addition, some unimportant materials and spirit tools were sold for several hundred spirit stones. Altogether, there were more than 3,000 spirit stones. Coupled with medicinal pills, some spirit tools that weren't convenient to sell, and possibly useful materials, she was now unprecedentedly rich. She wasn't inferior to ordinary foundation-building cultivators at all. However, she felt that it was better to keep a low profile. She didn't even take out the corpse of the iron-toothed crocodile. Of course, she wouldn't do something as extravagant as renting an immortal's cave. Thus, the days returned to tranquility. Every day, he would cultivate and occasionally listen to sermons. He didn't even take any errands in the steward's hall. Fortunately, after this incident, the school exempted disciples in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm and above from doing chores, so it didn't matter if he didn't take any errands. After being reprimanded by second uncle and losing contact with him, he was unprecedentedly focused on his cultivation. Coupled with the large amount of medicinal pills he consumed, it only took him 3 months to reach the aura refining perfection stage. She herself was rather surprised by this. She hadn't expected herself to have such a cultivation speed. Lu Yidao was still in the North Peak. She heard a martial uncle admired him very much and wanted to accept him as his disciple. Upon hearing this news, she suddenly realized she hadn't seen Lu Yidao for a long time. After thinking about it carefully, it seemed they had become a lot more distant. In the end, she felt a bit guilty, so she decided to find some time to visit Lu Yidao. However, this plan didn't come true in the end because she was stopped when she went to the North Peak. She could only ask a senior martial brother to pass her a message and transfer several unimportant things to him. She gradually heard about the reason why Jiang Shanghong didn't attempt to build his foundation. As it turned out, Jiang clan had a kind of medicinal pill that could assist in building one's foundation. It could increase one's chances of building one's foundation, but it wasn't easy to concoct. Only a small amount of medicinal pills were produced each time. Originally, with Jiang Shanghong's diligence and cultivation level, he should have been able to obtain one. Unfortunately, he was despised in Jiang clan. Moreover, Jiang Changxian, a direct descendant of the current clan head, was also going to build his foundation this time, so Jiang Shanghong's share was given to Jiang Changxian. Jiang Shanghong could only grit his teeth and accept the result. Foundation-building pills weren't easy to obtain, so he planned to endure until the next batch of medicinal pills was made. What Jiang Shanghong said was pure speculation, but in any case, they had known each other for more than 3 years. Based on Jiang Shanghong's personality, it was very likely he would think that way. Mo Tinga felt a bit envious when she heard this news. There was actually a medicinal pill that could increase one's chances of building one's foundation. However, since this kind of medicinal pill existed, the sect had never heard of it. It wasn't that the pill recipe was too complicated or the materials were too rare, so they couldn't be provided to ordinary disciples. Even Jiang Shanghong couldn't obtain Jiang clan's things, let alone her. Therefore, she could only be envious. When she reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm and her cultivation couldn't advance any further, Imo Tiange went down the mountain. Although second uncle severely reprimanded her last time and ordered her not to see him until she figured it out, Imo Tiange still came to see him once every half a month. However, second uncle only said a few words to her before he drove her back to the mountain. This time, however, it was different. She had something very important to say. Second uncle, Yi Jiang, who was still recuperating in the small room, looked even older. When he heard her voice, he didn't even open his eyes. Why did you come here? Go back and cultivate. Imo Tiange didn't give up. She said, second uncle, I've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Yi Jiang finally opened his eyes. After sizing her up, a faint smile appeared on his face. 3 months? That's more like it. Imo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that second uncle finally didn't look so tense anymore. She sat in front of the bed as usual and asked, second uncle, are you all right? I won't die for the time being. Upon seeing her worried expression, Yi Jiang's heart finally softened. He said slowly, second uncle's injuries have been very good recently. I reckon he can hold on until next year. Imo Tiange lowered her head in silence. This was indeed good news. 2 years ago, second uncle said that his lifespan was only 2 or 3 years. Now, at least, he could confirm that it was the longer one. All right, since you've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, you should strive to build your foundation. Are you ready to build your foundation? Imo Tiange shook her head, feeling very confused. Second uncle, I can feel that my cultivation level is no longer a problem, but I'm still lacking something if I enter closed-door meditation to build my foundation. What is it? Yi Jiang muttered. Second uncle has already explained to you how to build your foundation and made you familiar with the process. Logically speaking, you should be well prepared. Do you have any doubts? After hesitating for a moment, Imo Tiange nodded and said, whenever I think about building my foundation, I always feel flustered. I don't have any confidence at all. I guess so. Yi Jiang understood. It seems that you weren't mentally prepared. This is a bit difficult. If you forcibly enter closed-door meditation to build your foundation, your mentality will be unstable and your state will also be unstable, which will affect the success of building your foundation. Yes, I can't make up my mind to enter closed-door meditation immediately. Second uncle, what should I do? Yi Jiang said, it's no wonder you feel that way. Most people cultivate until the peak stage of the aura refining realm and wait a long time for foundation building pills, so they're fully prepared. But because of second uncle, you're in a hurry to cultivate until the peak stage of the aura refining realm and are about to build your foundation. Then what should I do? Yi Jiang closed his eyes as if he was thinking. Imo Tiange stared at him anxiously. She knew that although second uncle's situation was a bit better than she expected, he only had 1 year left to live. She wanted second uncle to see her build her foundation before he passed away and leave with peace of mind. Therefore, she couldn't afford to delay this 1 year. Yi Jiang finally opened his eyes. He seemed to have made a decision. After staring at her for a long time, he said slowly, Tiange, you should leave the mountain and travel around for a while. Huh? Imo Tiange was dumbfounded. Travel? Doesn't that mean I have to leave Mount Yunwu? And second uncle? Yi Jiang nodded. Yes. Whenever a cultivator is stuck in a bottleneck or their state of mind is unstable, traveling is the best solution. But, Imo Tiange said anxiously, wouldn't that mean I have to leave this place? Second uncle, how can I leave you here alone? Yi Jiang showed a faint smile. Are you worried that second uncle will suddenly die here? Imo Tiange was speechless. She was indeed afraid. She was afraid that if second uncle passed away, she still wouldn't be able to build her foundation. However, she was even more afraid that second uncle would finish his last journey alone while she was gone. Yi Jiang sighed. Rest assured, when the end of a cultivator's lifespan is near, their perception of destiny will also become stronger. After making this decision, second uncle feels that he can still wait until you come back. Go. If you stay, I'm afraid it'll take more time. Second uncle, be obedient. Tinga struggled for a long time, but still shook her head resolutely. No. What if something unexpected happens? I won't go. What if you have to go? I absolutely won't go. Yi Jiang closed his eyes, as if he didn't want to argue with her anymore. He knew how stubborn this child was. When he was seriously injured while hunting demonic beasts, his companions threw him on the road. It was this child who ran into the forest to find him regardless of her life. In the end, the two of them escaped from a life and death situation. Xiao Dian, take second uncle's natal primordial spirit tablet and go on your way. Tinga was startled, but she only called out in a daze, second uncle. Yi Jiang closed his eyes and sighed. If anything happens to second uncle, you'll know when you see that primordial spirit tablet. Do you feel relieved now? Yi Jiang didn't say anything else to her. He took out a jade tablet from his robe, made a hand seal with his right hand, and muttered something. A moment later, a drop of bright blood appeared between his eyebrows. He sped up his chanting and made a cut with his fingertip. The drop of blood instantly followed his hand and entered the jade tablet. The jade tablet immediately turned from white to dark red. After doing this, Yi Jiang coughed violently several times. Second uncle, Tinga, hastily supported him and patted his back. After a while, Yi Jiang regained his breath. He waved his hand and handed the jade tablet to her. If something happens to me, the natal blood essence inside it will be lost. If you see its color change, you can come back immediately. Tinga silently took it. It seemed that second uncle had made up his mind to give her a natal jade tablet. Yi Jiang waved his hand and ordered her to go back. He said, "All right, go back to the sect and report this. Pack your things and go out to travel. Remember, open your mind and don't think about cultivating. Come back in half a year." Tinga was silent for a moment. A moment later, a decisive expression appeared on her face as she nodded. "I understand, second uncle." Chapter 73. It was normal for cultivators to travel when they reached a bottleneck. Many aura refining disciples who reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm but felt they were still lacking in the foundation building realm would choose to travel. Therefore, Tinga only needed to report to the steward's hall to get permission. Traveling wasn't a sightseeing tour, but a search for fated chances. Fated chances sometimes had a greater impact on cultivators than aptitude. For example, 1,000 years ago, there was a cultivator with poor aptitude who unexpectedly reached the nascent soul realm and possessed great divine power, allowing him to move unhindered in Kunwu for a while. Of course, fated chances were also hard to come by. Fated chances like this only appeared once in many years. For most people, being able to obtain some spiritual plants or spiritual objects or have an epiphany that allowed them to break through their bottlenecks was already extremely good. Tinga didn't have such a delusion. With her aptitude, if she relied on unobtainable fated chances, she probably wouldn't make a realm breakthrough even if she had 800 years of lifespan. Moreover, to be exact, her situation wasn't a bottleneck, but an unstable state of mind. Because she was pressed for time and her aptitude was too poor, she didn't have any hope of successfully building her foundation, so she couldn't calm down. After thinking for a long time, Tinga felt it was better to go to some big cultivation groups and communicate with their disciples. In any case, she was still young and had already obtained a foundation-building pill, so there was no need for her to take risks for fated chances. With that decided, she bid farewell to second uncle and left Mount Yunwu. This was her first time traveling alone. Ever since she came to Kunwu, she had never left second uncle to go on a trip alone. However, she was no longer the little girl who came to Kunwu for the first time. She had seen a lot and was confident she could handle any situation she encountered. Mount Yunwu was located in a small corner of East Kunwu. Before it was annexed, there were only Zixia sect and Jindao school nearby. The nearest cultivation group was also thousands of miles away. Aside from some small cultivation groups, the closest one was undoubtedly the head of Kunwu's 7 great cultivation groups, Righteous Path's Tiandao sect. The 7 great cultivation groups in Kunwu were Tiandao sect, Xianqing school, Gujian sect, Biyun sect, Zhengfa school, Lingshou sect, and Danding school. Among them, the Spirit Beast sect and the Danding school. One was a beast-taming sect, and the other was a pill-concocting sect. Both of them were unorthodox sects, and they only had slightly more people than the middle-level cultivation sections. However, because these 2 sects were quite skilled in beast-taming and pill-concocting, their sects were much stronger than the middle-level cultivation sections. Therefore, they were ranked as one of the 7 great sections. The stronger ones were the Biyun sect and the Zhengfa sect. Zheng Fa sect was a Taoist sect. Most of the disciples in the sect were dressed as Taoist priests. However, Biyun sect was a peculiar sect. The disciples recruited by the sect were all very beautiful regardless of whether they were male or female. There were many female disciples, so there were many dual cultivation partners in the sect. After them were Gujian sect and Xianqing school. Gujian sect was a cultivation group for sword cultivators. Sword cultivators spent their entire lives cultivating only one sword, and most of their divine abilities were focused on one sword. Sword cultivators had always been a bit more powerful than ordinary cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was also harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Therefore, although Gujian sect high-level cultivators were only about the same as Zhengfa school and Biyun school, their strength was actually a bit higher. Gujian sect had always been considered to be on par with Xianqing school. Xianqing school's strength was second only to Tiandao sect. Like Zhengfa school, it was also a Dao school. For several thousand years, Tiandao sect had always been regarded as the leader of the righteous path in Kunwu. It was located in the northeast of Kunwu and was separated from the devil path by a mountain. Tiandao sect was different from other cultivation groups. Its unique characteristic was that it didn't have any unique characteristics. It didn't have any cultivation techniques, and it didn't force its disciples to cultivate anything. Unorthodox cultivation techniques were fine, and it didn't even care if they cultivated devil cultivation techniques as long as they didn't violate the sect's commandments. Tiandao sect's strength was precisely due to its tolerant management method. Every Tiandao sect disciple was treated equally regardless of what they cultivated, so there were many special talents in the sect. Mo Tinga wanted to go to Tiandao sect because it was the leader of the righteous path and its disciples cultivated a variety of things. Not only could she gain more experience, but she also didn't have to worry about any accidents. Although there were no absolute righteous people among cultivators, people of the righteous path still didn't encourage fighting. So it would be a bit safer to interact with disciples of the righteous path. Not far from Mount Yunwu, Emo Tinga found a place to change out of Yunwu sect's disciple uniform and put on very ordinary clothes. Yunwu sect had already been annexed by Zixia sect, and that unforeseen event happened a month ago, so it was better for her to be a bit more cautious. Soon after, she used the light body technique and headed northeast. In the past, when she wandered with second uncle, Emo Tinga once met a cultivator who was actually a martial artist in the secular world who entered the Tao through martial arts. She was very interested in their so-called martial arts and body techniques, so she learned some of them. In the past few years, from the Immortals Assembly to the Foundation Building Pill Competition, she benefited a lot. When she used the light body technique, she was also faster than ordinary cultivators. In less than half a month, she arrived at the boundary of Tiandao sect. Tiandao sect's sphere of influence was very large. This area already belonged to it. In fact, there were only a few small cultivation groups attached to it in the surrounding area. However, the market square here was very special. It actually held a Tao assembly at a fixed time and invited foundation building cultivators from Tiandao sect to participate. Anyone could participate in this Tao assembly as long as they paid the entrance spirit stones. Moreover, they could raise questions to the cultivator giving the lecture and discuss the Tao with each other. Mo Tiange was very interested in this Tao assembly. Since the entrance fee wasn't expensive, she waited here. In addition, she also sold some spirit tools that weren't convenient to sell near Mount Yunwu in batches. Because the flow of people here was quite complicated and it was quite a distance from Mount Yunwu, these spirit tools were sold smoothly and earned her a lot of spirit stones. After coming out of shop, Mo Tiange turned a corner and took off her robe. She changed her appearance and revealed her true appearance. When she went to the shops to sell spirit tools, she used the transfiguration technique to disguise herself into various different appearances because she still couldn't let people know the origin of these spirit tools. Besides, these shops didn't care whether the customers used the transfiguration technique or not. It was fine as long as they couldn't see her true appearance. She leisurely walked around the corner and released her divine sense. She didn't find anything unusual, so she faintly smiled and went into another shop. This shop's appearance was simple and didn't have any decorations. There were several brocade boxes on the counter containing spirit tools, talismans, medicinal pills, and some miscellaneous items. The shopkeeper was a mortal woman. When she saw Mo Tiange, she greeted her enthusiastically. "Master Immortal, what do you want?" Mo Tiange was just strolling around, so she didn't answer immediately. She casually sized up the spirit tools on the counter before she turned to look at the woman. But when she turned her head, she was stunned. This woman was in her 20s and was quite beautiful. Although she was a mortal, she wasn't much worse than a female cultivator. Of course, this wasn't why Mo Tiange was surprised. What surprised her was that this woman looked so familiar. Mo Tiange carefully thought about it, but she couldn't remember when she saw this woman. Master Immortal? Mo Tiange regained her composure and saw the woman looking at her anxiously. She suddenly realized that she hadn't answered for a long time, but had been staring at this woman for a long time. Moreover, she was now dressed like a man, so she must have scared this woman. Mo Tiange thought it wasn't convenient to explain, so she asked, "What do you sell in this shop?" Seeing that Mo Tiange's expression was normal, the woman promptly smiled and introduced, "Look at these spirit tools, talismans, and medicinal pills. They're all excellent. In addition, this shop also sells talisman paper and talisman brushes. They're all made of high-grade, demonic beast materials. Please take a look." Mo Tiange had already swept her eyes over the things displayed on the shelves. The spirit tools were only common goods. They weren't high-grade spirit tools. The talismans were also low-grade talismans. She didn't know about the medicinal pills, but judging from the other things, they were probably just common medicinal pills. She just sold a lot of spirit tools, and she had a lot of talismans and medicinal pills on her, so she basically didn't need them. Thus, she casually grabbed a handful of talisman paper, a talisman brush, and some cinnabar. How many spirit stones do you have here?" The woman looked at them, then said with a smile, "These talisman papers and cinnabar only cost 1 spirit stone, but this talisman brush costs 7 spirit stones. For the current Mo Tiange, 8 spirit stones weren't much." She immediately took out 8 spirit stones from her chinquan bag and placed them on the counter. The woman was very happy that a business deal was completed so easily. She wrapped up the things she wanted and handed them to Mo Tiange, then said respectfully, "Master Immortal, these are the things you wanted." Mo Tiange took them and was about to leave when a young cultivator came into the shop. This cultivator was only in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. He wore ordinary clothes and looked exhausted, but his face was handsome and looked quite elegant. As soon as the young cultivator entered the shop, the woman who guarded the shop called out happily, "Husband, you're early today." As it turned out, he was this woman's husband. This wasn't uncommon. Female cultivators were originally fewer than male cultivators, and many low-level female cultivators were taken as concubines by high-level cultivators. It was often very difficult for low-level male cultivators to find a Tao companion, so many of them married mortal women as their wives or concubines. Mo Tiange didn't know whether this beautiful woman in front of her was a wife or a concubine. The cultivator responded faintly with a very cold expression. Once he raised his head and saw Mo Tienga, he immediately smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, do you need anything?" Mo Tienga naturally knew she was already in the top layer of the aura refining realm, so this cultivator didn't dare to look down on her. It was just that he was so cold to his wife, yet he greeted others with a smile, which made her a little unhappy, especially when she turned her head and saw the faint loneliness in the woman's eyes. She felt even more sad. It was basically impossible for a mortal woman to get equal status with a cultivator. To put it nicely, they were wives and concubines, but to put it bluntly, they were playthings. So what if she was a female cultivator, let alone a mortal woman? She recalled Shunbing. She had good qualifications and had the backing of her family, but she was still dragged down by her beauty and became someone else's concubine. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tienga suddenly lost her mood and coldly said, "It's nothing." The cultivator didn't care about her indifference and still said enthusiastically, "Fellow Taoist, you can look around more. Everything else in my shop isn't good, but the talisman papers and talisman brushes are all good. I personally made them." Before Mo Tienga could say anything, the woman already said, "Husband, this master immortal has bought talisman papers and talisman brushes in the shop." "Really?" The cultivator smiled awkwardly. "That being the case, thank you for your patronage, fellow Taoist. Please make yourself at home." Mo Tienga nodded slightly, but she didn't want to leave. She pretended to be interested and started to examine the spirit tools on the shelves. The woman was about to introduce them, but Mo Tienga waved her hand and said, "No need to greet me. If you like them, you'll tell me." Seeing that Mo Tienga didn't want to be disturbed, the woman retreated. Seeing her husband's tired appearance, she hurried back and forth to serve tea. Mo Tienga sighed inwardly. She really didn't understand. This cultivator obviously didn't treat his wife well. So why did this woman still love him so much? "Husband, you came back so early today. Did everything go smoothly?" Upon hearing his wife's question, the cultivator opened his eyes. He then took out a cloth bag from his chinkoan bag and threw it to the side. "My luck was bad today, so I only managed to pick these. You can go and tidy them up." The woman nodded, then picked up the cloth bag and went inside. Upon seeing this, Mo Tienga casually picked several talismans, paid several spirit stones, and left. Chapter 74. When Mo Tienga washed her face in the evening, she suddenly understood why she felt that woman's face was familiar. After removing her disguise, her face in the mirror was clearly somewhat similar to that woman's. The similarities were in their eyebrows and facial contours. The facial contours were fine, but their eyebrows and eyes were too similar. If she hadn't disguised herself, she might have been discovered on the spot. It was strange. She didn't have any sisters, and the closest relatives were all in the secular world. It was impossible for Yi Clan's people to still stay in Kunwu, right? Second uncle said that when he moved Yi Clan to the secular world, he especially left a message that unless they had spiritual roots, they would never set foot in Kunwu again. This woman was a mortal, so she obviously didn't have spiritual roots. She stood in front of the mirror for a while, but she couldn't figure out why, so she returned to the bed and meditated. If she wanted to figure it out, she would go and ask her tomorrow. After reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, she discovered that the spiritual aura in her body had changed. She practiced two cultivation techniques. One was the art of Sunu, and the other was the greenwood art. Because the art of Sunu was faster, it was her main cultivation technique, while the greenwood art was her secondary cultivation technique. However, the spiritual aura absorbed by these two cultivation techniques was about the same. Although the greenwood art absorbed with spiritual aura, it also absorbed a small amount of other spiritual aura. The art of Sunu, on the other hand, could absorb any kind of spiritual aura. The spiritual aura absorbed by the two cultivation techniques was mixed together, so there was no difference. However, After reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, a wisp of Ean's spiritual aura gradually appeared in her body. It was very small, but it was very different from other spiritual auras. The two wisps of spiritual aura circulated in her meridians, neither interacting nor repelling each other. She didn't have time to tell second uncle about this, but it didn't seem harmful at the moment, so she just let it be. Now that she had reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, cultivating couldn't increase her spiritual aura. It could only make her spiritual aura purer. Emotinga was just used to cultivating, so she would meditate when she had nothing to do. However, something surprising happened during her habitual cultivation this time. The two unrelated wisps of spiritual aura in her dantian and meridians were still circulating separately, but the wisp of Ean's spiritual aura gradually became more abundant. After discovering this phenomenon, she did an experiment. In her dantian, she separated the two types of spiritual aura into two strands and let them slowly come into contact with each other. As a result, not long after, the mixed spiritual aura of each attribute decreased a little, and the cool spiritual aura increased a little. Once she verified that this cool spiritual aura could nibble away at her original spiritual aura, she immediately stopped cultivating. Although she could control the two spiritual auras at the moment, and there was no difference, she still hadn't figured out what was going on with this cold spiritual aura. It was best not to act rashly. After pondering for a while, she felt that this Ean spiritual aura might be Ean aura produced by cultivating the art of Sunu. However, the cultivation technique didn't mention this change, so she didn't dare to confirm it. Generally speaking, the sky was yang, the earth was Ean, men were yang, and women were Ean. Actually, both men and women had Ean and yang in their bodies. It was just that men had more yang and less Ean, while women had more Ean and less yang. As a result, the cultivation techniques of the cultivation world were created specifically for female cultivators, and all of them leaned towards the Ean attribute. Since the art of Sunu could only be practiced by female cultivators with pure Ean constitution, it must be even more so. However, she had never heard that the spiritual aura produced by female cultivators was different from that of male cultivators, so she couldn't be sure whether this was Ean aura or not. The night passed very quickly. Emotinga packed her things and went out. Today was the opening day of the Tao conference jointly organized by the market square. On this day, every month, the surrounding cultivators would flock to this place. Most of them were aura-refining cultivators who yearned to enter Tiandao sect. Occasionally, there were also foundation-building cultivators who wanted to discuss Tao with Tiandao sect cultivators. Emotinga had already inquired about the location of the Taoist sanctum. After taking several detours, she directly walked towards an ordinary small courtyard. The gate of the small courtyard was open, and there were two low-level cultivators guarding the gate. Occasionally, people would come and hand over spirit stones in exchange for an identity tablet. Emotinga followed behind them, handed over two spirit stones, received a wooden identity tablet with a number engraved on it, and entered the small courtyard. Soon after, she passed through a central room and was led into another room. She then walked up a staircase leading to the underground. After making many turns and walking for a while, she finally entered a hall. This hall was enormous, not much smaller than Yunwu Sect's preaching palace. It could accommodate at least 1,000 people. The innermost part of the hall was a high platform with several praying mats on it. Below the platform, tables, chairs, and praying mats were all available. After listening to the receptionist's introduction, Emotinga finally learned that if one paid an extra spirit stone, they could sit on a chair. At that time, she simply didn't ask and only paid the admission fee, so she could only sit on a praying mat. In any case, she didn't care, so she found a corner that was neither too far nor too close to sit down and close her eyes to rest. In fact, most people still sat on praying mats. 2 spirit stones per month was already quite a lot for individual cultivators. Ordinary aura refining disciples of Yunwu sect only received 5 spirit stones per month. People entered the Taoist sanctum one after another. After a long time, the number of people gradually increased. When the hall was gradually full, Imo Tinga opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. There were quite a lot of people who came, but only 20% of the seats were empty. Among these people, some were loose cultivators dressed casually, some were disciples of small sects dressed in sect uniforms, and some were disciples of big clans with attendants. It seemed this Tao conference was very successful. Not only individual cultivators came, but even people from cultivation groups and clans were willing to come. This made her look forward to this Tao conference a bit more. There were still people coming in from the outside. It wasn't until the people who came occupied the 9th floor that the people gradually stopped coming. A quarter of an hour later, the hall's door was closed. At the same time, the small door at the innermost part of the hall opened, and several aura refining cultivators led a foundation building cultivator to the high platform. At the same time, all the aura refining cultivators in the hall stood up and saluted. Seeing this, Imo Tinga also followed the crowd. This foundation building cultivator was a man in his early 30s. He wore a light purple Taoist robe with white edges. His expression was calm, and he looked a bit like an immortal. Imo Tinga couldn't sense which stage of the foundation building cultivator he was in. Unless low-level cultivators practiced some kind of secret technique, they wouldn't be able to sense the specific cultivation level of high-level cultivators. However, the lifespan of foundation building cultivators was between 300 to 400 years. This cultivator looked like he was only in his 30s, so his real age was probably less than 100 years old. Based on the average age of foundation building cultivators, he could be considered young. The foundation building cultivator sat down on a praying mat in the middle of the high platform. He glanced at the audience and said, "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Xiangdao from Tiandao sect. Today, I'll give a sermon to everyone. If any fellow Taoists want to come, you're also welcome." The man paused for a moment, then continued, "I think everyone has probably heard a lot about cultivation experiences. Why don't I tell everyone about my foundation building experience today?" Hearing this, Imo Tinga immediately became spirited. Originally, she was only interested in this kind of Tao conference organized by market squares. She didn't expect they'd talk about foundation building experiences. This was exactly what she wanted to hear the most right now. As for foundation building experiences, the martial uncles in Yunwu sect who gave sermons also talked about them to aura refining disciples who were about to build their foundation. However, she didn't know how they compared to the foundation building cultivators in Tiandao sect. She wasn't the only one who was excited. The others were even more excited. It must be known that individual cultivators rarely had the opportunity to hear about this kind of content. Although clans' descendants and disciples from small cultivation groups had the opportunity, this was a cultivator from Tiandao sect, the #1 cultivation group in the celestial pole. It was definitely different from what their seniors said. When Xiangdao paused for a moment, as if he was thinking about how to start. After a while, he slowly said, "I think everyone knows how aura refining cultivators build their foundation. First, they have to cultivate until they reach the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Second, they have to take a foundation building pill. Then, they have to enter closed door meditation for a year and a half. If they succeed, they'll advance to the foundation building realm. If they fail, they'll remain in the aura refining realm. If they're relatively lucky, they'll enter the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Now, I'll talk about my process and experiences in building my foundation. I have 3 spiritual roots and am very ordinary in Tiandao sect. The cultivation technique I practice is also a very ordinary 5 elements cultivation technique. I was lucky enough to obtain a foundation building pill, and as a result, I succeeded in building my foundation on my first try. I think many of you are as ordinary as I am. Ordinary people like me have very little hope of building their foundation, but you're also hoping that your ancestors will be blessed with luck and you'll be able to enter the foundation building realm in one go. But what I want to tell you today is that building your foundation isn't just about luck. As we all know, spiritual roots affect the speed at which one absorbs spiritual aura, affects the effect of cultivation, and also affects the probability of advancing to the next realm. It can be said that people with few spiritual roots are more suitable for cultivation than those with mixed spiritual roots. Some people can advance to the next realm easily, while others have to struggle bitterly. Of course, you shouldn't be delusional enough to think that building your foundation has nothing to do with spiritual roots. That's impossible. However, as long as you have enough patience, you can still slightly shorten the distance between you and people with natural spiritual roots. Many cultivators, after cultivating until the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, are anxious to immediately advance to the next realm. In fact, there are still several factors that affect the success rate of building your foundation. One of them is the density of your spiritual aura. His last sentence surprised Enchanting. Density of spiritual aura? What does that mean? Wan Xiangdao went on to say, do you know what kind of changes will happen to your body after you build your foundation? He swept his gaze over everyone. As he expected, everyone was silent, so he continued, let me tell you something. If you build your foundation, your meridians will become wider, your dantian will become bigger, and the spiritual aura that originally flowed between your dantian and meridians will become liquid. This way, your body will have extra space to continue absorbing spiritual aura. By now, you should have already guessed what I'm going to say. Yes, if you stay in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm for a long time, your spiritual aura will become a bit purer, and it'll be very easy for you to achieve the condition of turning your spiritual aura into liquid. Emotinga had never heard of this theory before. Second uncle only told her that it would be difficult to build his foundation if time was too tight, but he never mentioned these reasons. Emotinga didn't know whether this theory was concluded by Tiandao sect or not, but she immediately concentrated on recording everything in a jade slip. She planned to tell second uncle when she went back and let him judge whether it was the correct explanation. When Xiangdao talked nonstop for an hour before he finally finished explaining this part. He paused for a moment, then started the next part. In addition, I also want to tell everyone that just because inner demons appear only in the core formation realm, you shouldn't ignore your mentality. You're right, inner demons indeed won't appear in the foundation building realm, but your mentality will affect your behavior and also affect your confidence. Don't ignore your mentality. A person with a stable mentality will start building his foundation in an orderly manner and will be able to calmly solve problems he encounters. This way, from another perspective, will also increase his chances of building his foundation. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.